Welcome to the Scott Holland podcast, where I don't know if in our 9 seasons we have a more stark dichotomy between what we're going to be talking about football wise tonight and what we are going to be talking about in terms of, yes, folks, it's finally here. We are on the doorstep of men's basketball season, the Cougar sports season. I think this fan base, when it became official that this was going to be a Big 12 team at some point in the not too distant future, I think that was the season that we were all most excited to see the first one of and most excited to see compete in that league generally. So a lot of negatives up front, a lot of positives in the back end. You're going to eat your veggies here tonight. You're going to get a full balanced meal when it comes to Cougar sports. Dustin, I don't have any more food analogies to go here. I've run out of roadway, so I'm going to ask you, how's it going, bud?
Well, the most recent football game that the University of Houston played is now multiple days in the rearview mirror, so it's doing okay. I suspect we're going to be dipping back into the abyss a little bit to talk about that one because that's about the only honest way to talk about it. So that'll be fun. I don't know if I would say I'm looking forward to that conversation per se, but happy to be here. And I am I'm happy to be getting to see Bobby in person here in a few days. I'm less excited about the reason why I'm going to go see Bobby in person here in a few days. I'm excited that I'm going to go see Bobby in a few days. So all in all, I can't complain.
Guys, Bobby is actually, I want to break here first on the show. He's going to be getting a certification to be a master yodeler. But Dustin is the kind of friend that would like not enjoy yodeling, but would still be there for you. Bobby, I don't know I don't know what the occasion you guys have for meeting up is. It's not yodeling. How you doing, bud?
Great, man. And it is this weekend,
Oh,
Saturday. We'll both be
there's
in
like
Waco.
the football game.
Yeah, that's why we're not excited about it, because that is going to be a rough game to watch if you are any kind of football fan. I am getting over a cold, just a little head cold. I tested for COVID negative, so let's go there. But also, I'm going to be about 20% in this podcast. My Rangers are trying to clinch the World Series right now. So I definitely have it up. So if I seem distracted, I am. I am definitely watching. I went to plenty of terrible Rangers games when I was a kid. So I feel like I've put in the work to see hopefully something good happen. Because last time we were here, Dustin and I were watching a game together, and there was this home run that happened, and it was crazy. So yeah, I'm in it, but and I have my thoughts. But if you see me, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, and I am definitely not looking at Sam and Dustin talk, it is because I'm watching baseball right now. So
big fan of the New York Rangers. All right, I was gonna make a like the Scottish soccer team Rangers FC, but they probably would not be playing at 8:08 Central Time.
But did you see what happened with that? Actually, they hired some like K-pop group.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. They were playing a show in DFW, and like every act comes in, they're like pandering, like, oh, local sports team, and their people accidentally ordered Scottish Rangers FC jerseys instead of the Texas Rangers, which was a funny.
It's great.
It's funny great. Screw up if there ever has been one. Back to get this cart back on the road here. Got to mention at the top, of course. Patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. If you want to financially support what we do and get access to our football recap episodes, other premium content as well. You just want to support what we do, patreon.com/shpodcast for as little as 16 cents a day. You can be making really important kind of financial contributions to our independent weekly Houston Cougar sports podcast. Of course, going to mention our partners, Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, apparel partners of the Big 12, apparel partners of the Scott Holland podcast, two equal entities right there. You're going to get incredibly comfortable wearables at Charlie Hustle, t-shirts, crew necks, hoodies. Got a little bit of a hint this week that might even be some jackets in our future, guys. I would just absolutely have the end of my year made if we get some vintage Charlie Hustle jackets sooner than later. So maybe watch this space there. But in the meantime, a really fantastic existing collection of t-shirts, crew necks, hoodies, like I said at the top, and you're going to save 15% off that on that order by using the promo code SHP15, SHP15. You're not just going to save money, you're going to show Charlie Hustle listeners of this show do in fact get awesome vintage Cougar wearables that you're not going to find anywhere else. That's Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com. Guys, typically at this point being the time that I would be recapping the previous Saturday's football game, I'd be kind of doing a condensed version of what happened in the most recent game. And I gotta be honest, as I put together my notes for this, I really don't think I have it in me, guys. Saturday was the first time in 8,435 days prior, this dates back to September 23rd of 2000, that the Cougar football program played in a football game and did not register a single point. In the time in between those two ignominious occasions, Cougar football has had 2 conference championships, 5 double-digit win seasons, 6 head coaching changes, and 2 conference moves. I probably don't need to tell you, the people listening, watching, or my friends recording with me, 23 years is a long time. And I think, frankly, it probably would have taken some absurd amount of time for U of H to actually have strung together something that looked like a scoring drive in this one. The only time the Cougs got the ball even close to the K-State end zone on Saturday was when this was a 14-0 game and K-State's freshman quarterback Avery Johnson almost literally hot potatoed the ball onto the turf in front of some Cougar defenders. It would be, honestly, guys, I think the easiest turnover I've ever seen a Cougar defense get correctly credited for in nearly 2 decades of truly in a dedicated way following this program. And yet, in that situation, the Cougar offense was only able to go 2 yards backwards. Jack Martin misses a 45-yard field goal, and frankly, this offense never even got really remotely close to field goal range after that. I've probably seen worse performances than Saturday's because I've seen this Cougar team play bad against much worse teams than a top 25 K-State team. I think, honestly, if they keep it up, could be a top 10 or 15 team by the time it's all said and done. You know, I think back to games like 2007 Tulsa and 2012 Tulsa and the 2012 and 2014 openers that we've all tried to erase from our memories as well. And still taking out the context, though, of who the Cougars were playing on Saturday, I can tell you with absolute certainty, I have not seen a more lifeless and doomed effort with my own eyes than the one we saw on Saturday against K-State. And let me tell you, I was trying so hard, guys, to go into this game, not worry about the specific outcome. K-State, clearly a superior team. They're playing at home. Just had a hard time seeing this game being anything other than a multi-score loss. And in terms of whether this team is going to get to or get close to bowl eligibility, I think the November games are going to determine it. I at no point ever came close to penciling this in as a win or even an upset spot for the Cougs. And yet, the effort we got in all phases of this game on Saturday, guys, not committing blatantly stupid penalties, offense, defense, special teams, it was all a fucking failure. Every bit of it, just from the top down. And I understand there isn't really anything you could say as the head coach when your team is on the losing end of a 41-0 loss that makes the fan base feel great about it. But it sure doesn't make me feel great to hear the following from this program's head coach after the game. And I listened to this a few times so I could quote verbatim. Quote, "We knew it'd be challenging. It's Big 12 football. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be growing pains. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It's tough. It's a great league." So that's where we are right now, guys. Recapping a team on the receiving end of a 3rd blowout in 5 total games of conference play so far, getting shut out for the first time in 23 years, going over 60 minutes without scoring. Thank you for getting me this gem dust in my life. Going over 60 minutes without scoring for the 3rd time in just conference play.
Scoring an offensive touchdown.
Scoring offensive touchdown, excuse me. I feel better about, it's only scoring offensive touchdown.
Only, come on.
Oh, God, no, I'm even bringing up the stat. No. And by the way, don't forget, you lost also early this year for the first time in 13 years to Rice in a game where you trailed by 4 touchdowns. And as frustrating as this season is, I certainly wouldn't trade it for a completely hypothetical scenario where we're back in the AAC and we're 8-1. And, again, amazingly enough, U of H, as we sit in this awful place, is still in a better position right now than UCF and Cincy. I don't know, guys. I'll stop rambling, but I think Saturday was it for me. If this coach doesn't put 3 more wins on the table the rest of the season, I don't want to see another season of this. I have a hard time thinking how I could possibly enjoy a game less than I did the one on Saturday. Tustin, where is your head at after Saturday's just delightful athletic showing?
Yeah, the point I was being kind of pedantic about a minute ago is kind of where I want to start, because like this single game was the worst single game that Houston has played this year and has played in Big 12 play, certainly, but that's not to say there haven't been other, which is saying something, right? Because we've played a couple of other pretty disastrous games in Big 12 play this year, but like you mentioned, third 60 plus, which is 60 minutes. That's how long the game is. We've gone 60 minutes without an offensive touchdown 3 times now within 5 Big 12 games. And that's why when Donovan Smith has a relatively good game, when Parker Jenkins has a good game, the offense as a whole has a good game, we come back here and we say, hey, it looks like we're developing an offensive identity or whatever. And as I'm always kind of like, yeah, but I feel like I'm always also trying to throw in the caveat, but like, hey, yeah, but also we need to see this with like literally any kind of consistency. Not for 2.5 quarters, for a couple games, 2.5 games, maybe. Let's try 2.5 games of actually like playing.
Whoa.
Like that wouldn't that be something, and and again, like I've made this point before, this is our one good side of the ball. That's the one side of the ball you can say we're not completely just like awful at this year. And we are instead just maddeningly inconsistent. And you can say the weather conditions sucked. You can say, I don't care. I'm too apathetic about this.
It sucks so bad that K-State put up 41 on us.
Yeah. I'm too apathetic about this crap to even invent any more hypothetical excuses for this program, because none of it can possibly excuse getting goose-egged. And, like before the West Virginia and the UT Austin games, I said, hey, the staff hasn't really shown that they're very good at recruiting, which I'll touch on more in a little bit here after we're done with the game.
The head coach said something about recruiting recently?
Yeah. They're not good at consistent player development outside of like 1 or 2 positions. And so maybe the thing they can do is they can get their teams fired up for a big game. And you know what they did? Like they got the team fired up for the West Virginia and the Texas games, but then it came back to facing boringly, ruthlessly efficient Kansas State, and the emotional letdown was total. It was complete, where it was the game. The team barely can be described as having showed up for the game. Only in the most literal sense is that even true. We're 2/3 of the way through year 5 of the Dana Holgorsen era. We've never beaten a top 40 team in the regular season. And we're one miracle play away from being 2-6 with a loss to Rice. So, yeah, as much as I wanted to believe that, like, hey, maybe the West Virginia win and the last 2.5 quarters against Texas was a sign of things turning around. You got to sit and look at the totality of what we've seen and just say, man, this is not remotely good enough.
Yeah, it's just an embarrassment. Like, just a performance like that is just embarrassing. And not just for us fans, those guys better feel embarrassed by it too. That locker room should feel embarrassed. And that quote that you said, Sam, of where it's like, yeah, kind of is what it is. Like, no, man, we just got goose-egged by K-State. And again, like you said, Sam, I didn't expect this game for us to win and not lose by multiple scores. I had it 34-24 when I was talking to the Bosco's boys. And boy, don't I wish that came true. But like, I don't understand how this team goes from that performance versus Texas, that performance versus West Virginia, and then comes out and puts up 95 yards passing. 95 yards passing. It's embarrassing. It's awful. And I don't understand it. And I don't understand how something can be wildly inconsistent. And Sam, we've had this talk over the last couple of weeks. Is like, what does it take for Dana to stay, right? After that Texas game, it was kind of like, all right, we kind of like what he did. What is it going to take for him to stay? And we were kind of like, well, 5-7, maybe you can piece things together. You can kind of see it. And then 6-6, he definitely stays. Man, I don't know if he stays even at 6-6 after this performance. And I hate coming in week to week, and I know he's going to stay if he reaches 6 wins. Like, I just know he will. That was the goal going into the year. But like, at some point you have to be better than this and more consistent than this. And it's incredibly frustrating and embarrassing to watch these games. Guys, I left watching the game. I was sitting on my couch, chilling out, watching the game. And I said, you know what? I'd rather go to work right now. And I left watching the game early. I was like, I can think of many things I'd rather do. And that was go to work. I went to work instead of watching the end of this game. That's how bad this was.
I remember I did that Black Friday when we, I think it was the 2018 regular season finale against Memphis. And like, we were 3/4 of the way through just completely collapsing in the second half. And I was just like, I think I'll get to work about 30 minutes early. I don't think I need to see any more of this. It's a really great place to be. Good that we have multiple examples of us just in the last 5 years, just disliking what we saw so much that we decided to go to work early. That's just,
and guys, I make my own schedule. I don't have a set time I have to be anywhere. I can go whenever I want. And I was like, now's the time to go. Now is when I should go. That way I can get it done early and not have to sit here even longer and watch the rest of this game.
I'm sorry, Dustin, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I definitely at some point will just, I know Sam, you were saying that you would put the game on split screen. At some point, I just fully switched over to the Oklahoma Kansas game as my primary, and was like, yeah, if this one's at commercials, I'll flip back and see if the Cougs have managed to put up any points yet. But I don't know, man.
Spoiler, like, they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, just, I don't know. Broadly speaking, bad signs for your football program when like the three people who love Cougar sports so much that they're willing to just like devote time every single week to like talk about it and prepare. Yeah, if those people would rather go to work or watch any other game or do anything else than like watch your football products, man, that's not a great sign. And you can talk about,
we watch volleyball, women's soccer, we watch everything. And I'll tell you what, if you would have told me that there was a women's soccer game on at the same time as this, and they were going to wrap up, and that game was going to come on during the fourth quarter of this game, I probably would have tuned into the women's soccer game just to see, but it's just, like you said, when the three of us don't want to watch it, is pretty low.
Yeah, about halfway through the fourth quarter of the UHK State game, Dustin, I fully went over to Oklahoma, Kansas, because that was a good, compelling football game. And frankly, I think I'd seen all I needed to see. Didn't feel underprepared for this week's episode, having not watched 7 minutes of dire fourth quarter football. I had an idea in my head to challenge both of you to find like an offensive positive just for masochism. But I mean, other than maybe a couple Parker Jenkins carries, it doesn't exist. There isn't any other positive to be had. I mean, there were a couple.
Our quarterback had a QBR of 11.6.
Bobby, is it bad if it's lower?
I mean, it is bad if it's lower, but
this isn't like golf where low score is good.
No. We are not in Bobby's golf corner right now. We are in football where bigger numbers tend to do well.
I thought just a couple moments early from this game that really should have told all of us, the three of us, and anyone listening who have watched this game, that you were in for a long day. The defense on that first series got K-State to third and very long off of a nice sack by Chozia Nwankwo on the game's opening possession. K-State converts it easily on a dump off where I don't know if the K-State running back was touched before he reached the yardage to gain. And of course, K-State.
I totally forgot about that. Like that sack was the last moment of the game where I was like, all right, here we
go. It was a nice sack. Shout out to Chozia Nwankwo. He did something very few people are going to do this year and beat a K-State interior lineman one-on-one to get pressure. Less good by his defensive teammates on allowing I can't remember if it was Ward or Giddens to get a dump off pass, and just easily the most easy 3rd and 16 conversion you will see in Division I football this year. The other really ominous sign from the beginning of this game, how does the offense get a delay of game penalty coming off? And I said this week, I'm not going to pound my desk. I'm pounding my desk too much. But your guys' heads and your hands both say it. Off a TV timeout. How?
It's your first possession. It's your first possession. It's scripted. It's scripted. You script it. Every coach scripts that. You script your first drive, maybe your first 15, and you get a delay of game. Like it's there. You've been practicing your opening play all week. That's the only thing you've done. And you can't even get that right. It's just, oh God.
I mean,
why do we do this to ourselves every week? God.
I've said about like, this play call here or there. Like I'd like the staff to sit me down like an idiot and say, hey, here's why we're doing, this may look like this to you, but here's why we're doing X in this situation. There's nothing that anyone in this program could say to me that would convince me that it's just not the height of incompetence to get a delay of game penalty on your first play of the game offensively coming off a TV timeout. Just nothing. The few instances that Donovan Smith in this one got a clean pocket, he just looked badly out of sync with his receivers. The announcers mentioned that K-State, from their vantage point, they thought was doing a good job taking away the deep ball. And assuming that was the case, the Cougar offense didn't even have a semblance of an answer in terms of what to do in that situation. I think considering the lower level of competition for much of the 16, 17 years that I've been watching Cougar football prior, I'm not going to say that Donovan Smith's Saturday performance was the worst I've seen, but I haven't seen many worse. And that's even acknowledging that a lot of stuff in this game went wrong around Donovan Smith. Because this is definitely not a situation where I think a different QB would have meaningfully change this game, maybe get a touchdown drive here or there, but there's so much wrong around Donovan Smith that I don't want to seem like I'm putting on him entirely. There was this one play though. It's going to stick with me as long as I live, and I wish it didn't, guys. Late stages of the third quarter, third and long, Donovan Smith escapes seemingly half the K-State defense. You almost had to put on the Benny Hill music because it wasn't quick developing. Donovan Smith's running back there, and he's making guy after guy miss. Finally gets to around the line of scrimmage and just confoundingly throws the ball short of the line to gain into double coverage and to the grateful clutches of a K-State defender. One of the worst interceptions I've ever seen.
That's the play that made me go, yep, work is better than this. That play. That play, you see everything that makes Donovan Smith good, and then everything that makes Donovan Smith make you want to just lose your mind.
And again, not laying 100% of the bad performance at Smith's feet.
Absolutely.
But I can't think of much or anything that I saw him do evidently to help his cause on Saturday. I mean, again, you've seen really great games when he's playing well. Donovan Smith is up there for Cougar players that have really enjoyed watching the Texas game, the offense, the way it looked for 2 quarters and some change against West Virginia. Really exciting stuff. It reminded me of my favorite eras of Cougar football. But when he's bad, and we include last Saturday in that, we include TCU, the Big 12 opener, we include, I think, a good chunk of the Rice game, it's catastrophically bad. And that's kind of the problem with this team, is just that the ceiling is high enough to be competitive with Texas's best team since 2009. The floor is, this is so bad that Bobby leaves to go to work rather than watch one more quarter of this team. That's what it is. And that's what's so frustrating, is just you have these wild swings. And again, just I'm going to point out also on Saturday's game, I hate picking on guys individually, but I've been picking on Donovan Smith a lot. So I'm going to point out that starting right tackle Ruben Unije, who as of this week is the 453rd highest graded offensive tackle in the country per Pro Football Focus, is now responsible for 6 of the 12 accepted penalties called on the Cougar offensive line in 2023. And I won't belabor the point any more than I already have, but I think Saturday showed that this team doesn't have a Big 12 caliber offensive line, doesn't even have close to a Big 12 caliber offensive line. And you also have, at a critical position, a player now in his 6th year of college football, I think incapable of even coming close to dealing with what a Big 12 tackle needs to deal with. It that the staff has clearly missed so bad on so many key positions. The game is the really bad tasting thing in the short term, and the just really scary thought in the long term is this coach said this was a Big 12 roster and did not see any evidence of that, and seen precious little of it previous points this year.
This is his idea of a Big 12 roster. We're in trouble, boys.
Yeah, I mean, you say the thing about Donovan Smith, and it's just like, if you look at the tape for Donovan Smith prior to this year, you see a guy where there's some talent there, there's some leadership there, needs help with the decision making, needs help with the consistency, and that's something that you're supposed to see a guy as he gets older improve in those areas. If you're a guy as he gets older and he's around a coaching staff that knows what they're doing, you definitely expect him to see him improve in those. No, I don't think we've seen any improvement. Like I said, have we seen stretches? Yeah, he had stretches last year where he played real well. Like he beat the fucking Longhorns last year. He did some nice things last year. This year he's doing some nice things, and then he's also just making dumb decisions. He's also just not being consistent. Like where's the improvement? Like what has he gotten better at since last year? And that's when you remember, again, that's like you talk about belaboring points. Like this is one I haven't mentioned in this episode, but I bring it up a lot. But our freaking quarterbacks coach is the guy who's been in college football for a decade and could not advance past like Dana Holgorsen, quality control or offensive analyst or whatever the fuck. And we're like, yeah, let's put that guy in charge of coaching up the most important position on the field. But it's cool because, guys, Dana's the offensive line that's running things. So everything is A-okay. This offense is going great. I love it here.
I think I've been kind of not harsh on the offense because they scored 0 points, but I don't have anything nice to say really about the Cougar defense either. Maybe slightly better.
That's right. The defense also sucked ass.
Terrible.
We haven't even talked about it.
Nope. Maybe did slightly better in the second half just by virtue of getting the Wildcats to punt a few times. But I mean, I think that means very, very little. Yeah, exactly. Very, very little, considering by that point in the game, you were down at least 4 scores. again, we'll acknowledge the offense did less than nothing to take any pressure off the Cougar defense, but I also didn't see any evidence that the Cougar defense was even close to up to the task. Even if the offense had gone out there and actually had a few scoring drives, didn't see any evidence that the defense would have gotten effectively ran over just as much as they did on Saturday with the offense giving them nothing. And I think the box score is kind of deceptive because yes, the Cougars did hold K-State to under 200 yards rushing and under 4 yards per carry, but I don't think that really had much to do with the Cougars and what they were doing. I think that was just the effect of one, K-State trying to run as few plays as possible, certainly the last 2 quarters on Saturday. And I think the Wildcats realizing that the Cougars didn't have a prayer of stopping them anytime they attempted to pass. It won't be the most opposing pass yards allowed when it's all said and done. But really for me, guys, Saturday was one of the very worst pass defense performances I've ever seen from this defense. The Wildcats combined for only 3 incompletions the entire game. Basically every time Will Howard or Avery Johnson dropped back to pass, they had all day to find an open receiver and inevitably connected to the receiver who didn't have a single UH guy in his immediate vicinity. And I think both of those general points have been problems all season. And point number 2 has been a problem really since the start of last year. And I say this a lot. I'm not here to diagnose, is this an issue with man coverage, zone coverage, cover 1, cover 3? Is this an issue with even or odd defensive fronts? Any of that. All I'm here to say is that this defense allows more open opposing receivers than any defense I've laid my eyes on that's wore red and white. And I've seen some bad defenses. You guys, like me, have seen some bad defenses. This defense is just so bad. And the offense is kind of frustrating because we talked about it. They've teased the ability to play at a high level at different points this year, not often enough. And when it goes bad, oh, buddy, it's been bad. But they've at least shown flashes. Certainly not with enough consistency, but they've shown it. This defense since week 1 against UTSA, we've seen a good half or so against the Horns and dominating an overmatched Sam Houston team. And that's it. I have some hope that this offense down the stretch this season might look like a reasonable facsimile of a good offense against some bad teams. I have no such hope that this defense can do even decent against the low end of the Big 12 that we're going to see the rest of this month. And that's such a bad place for this team to be in right now that I have no faith in the offense and no faith that this defense could even stop a top 70, top 80 opposing offense. And I guess the good news is the next 2 offenses you're going to face are the 2 worst you're going to see in conference play, but I think you could forgive me if I don't have any faith they're going to actually do anything close to shutting them down.
Yeah, they haven't shown that they can even resemble a good defense against even a decent offense. So I think you're exactly right. What is this team going to look like? And, we talk about how bad this offense is, and it's pretty bad when they're not the worst part of the game that we're talking about.
Not even close.
I would rather see our offense versus our defense out there against a decent team. It's just like, I think our offense can do something sometimes. Our defense just hasn't shown it. And why are you still paying Doug Belk? I tweeted out, I said, can you fire a defensive coordinator at halftime? Like, I didn't want him tarmacked. I wanted him locker roomed. Like, you know what? Just go out there and here's all your reward points for flying whoever we use for flying United. Thank you very much. Go book yourself a ticket, enjoy the Little Apple the rest of the day, and your flight will be at 7:30. Like, it was
Doug Belk
awful.
at some brew pub watching the 2:30 slate of games. Like, hey, what are they like?
Just decked out in U of H gear, but he's really pissed to be wearing it. So like he puts electrical tape over the logo or something. Just like it was so bad. Just at some point, like I'm worried that he's not going to get a job somewhere else, and then we're going to have to like pay his buyout. I was hoping, since he's always been this whole young guru who's going to be the next head coach in college football. And he's going to be this young, and they were going to pay us the buyout and we were going to bring someone. No one's going to bring him anymore.
I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, Bobby. He's going to at some point leave here and he's going to go on an SEC staff as their safeties or secondary coach. And he's going to be the recruiter of the year. And they're like, wow, this guy's so awesome. It's like, why did this not add up to anything other than the worst defenses I've ever seen in the last year? None of you are arguing with me. I'm right. I feel like that's
what's his name over at Miami.
Yeah, Shannon Dawson.
Yeah,
Brandon Jones, the O-line coach at Mizzou, who's having their best season probably since entering the SEC.
Yep.
Look at all these guys that keep leaving here and flourishing. Maybe the problem wasn't Brandon Jones or Shannon Dawson this entire time, guys.
It's me. Hi. Oh, sorry. No,
Yeah,
I won't get us. I won't get us copyrighted there.
Yeah, or just like Swifties thinking you're disrespecting their queen or some shit. But I was just gonna say, like, to what you said, Bobby, I don't think Brian Early or Archie McDaniel or whoever you want to make the interim DC on the staff could do a worse job than this. I don't even think I'm complimenting those guys by saying that. I just think it's just like this. What else do you need to see here? What else do you need to do? At least signal to the market if Dana does somehow clear the bar to remain here, signal to the market that you're looking for a DC this offseason, which even with all the uncertainty surrounding him, if he's back, it's still a Big 12 DC job. It'll get a lot of good candidates.
Yeah, it's just I feel like I could grab a generic playbook on NCAA Football 13, which I have loaded up in the Xbox right now. I was playing it yesterday. I feel like I could just hit ask coach and he would give me a play and I'd be like, I don't know, F it, run this. And I could have a more, a better defense than what we're throwing out there right now. It's so bad, guys.
Yeah, as Houston was getting shut out offensively for the first time in 23 years. I don't even remember what the number ended up being, but I just kept hearing the announcers like, wow, he's completed his first 12 passes. Like, no Kansas State quarterback has done that in 20 years or whatever. Even on a game where the offense got shut out, I don't think you can meaningfully argue that the defense outplayed the offense. That is the kind of Cougar defense that we're dealing with this year.
Yeah, it's awful. It's so bad. And you could make a point for the defense if this game ends 24-0 or 17-0, but 41's, that's a lot, boys. That's a lot.
I guess my last thought in this game is I'm not really upset at the basic fact that we lost to K-State. That's a real good team. One that even way before the season, I think anyone should have known would be a real tough game for the Cougs to win. I want to make that clear. But I think also what we saw on Saturday was a level of performance that you'd expect from a visiting team just playing a early non-conference group of 5 body bag game. Put it this way, guys. Troy, a group of 5 team, managed at least 2 pre-garbage time scores against K-State in week 2. Not at least, exactly 2. This game could have been 60-something or 50-something to nothing if K-State really wanted to be spiteful. I really believe that. And if this U of H team is this uncompetitive with a roster that this coach has called a Big 12 roster, what are we doing here? Because my expectations are pretty low. I mean, maybe 2-3 scoring drives, losing by a few touchdowns. I'm not saying I'd be overjoyed if that was Saturday's outcome, but that would have been more palatable than getting shut out and never coming close to playing well in any phase of the game. I think November is judgment month for this head coach and this coaching staff. This loss doesn't change that fundamentally, but I think what this loss did for me was remove even any trace of real belief that this team is going to find 3 wins in the month of November. We'll gladly be wrong if they do. And if this team in a month's time has won at least 6 football games, then I don't think, even if we don't want it back, anyone should reasonably expect U of H to make a head coaching change. But I have seen scant evidence this team has 3 more wins in them this year, guys.
All right, Sam, you said it. You said he called this a Big 12 roster. This is his roster. He's been here for 5 years. It's no longer Major's roster. He's got 2 guys on it. And we talk about his recruiting and how there for a few years it seemed like it was doing all right. But he kind of said some stuff. Was that today or yesterday?
Yeah, why don't you? I want to Dustin. When you're done, Bobby, why don't you?
Do we have the quote? I didn't write it down, but the quote was definitely along the lines of, yeah, we've pretty much stopped recruiting for this upcoming year. Guys, we're ranked like 96th. We're the lowest P5. We would be one of the lowest, if not, we're the lowest in P5. We would be a mid to lower level G5 team. This recruiting class would suck if we were in the American. And now we're just like, yeah, it is what it is. And then his stupid ass excuse of recruits want to see the building going up. They want to see it actually happening. Like, you've been recruiting to this conference for 2 years. You've even said you've been recruiting to this conference for 2 years. You called
on
this roster
podcast. On this podcast.
Yes, you called this roster a Big 12 ready roster. And granted, we all knew it wasn't, right? If we all really, you give us all truth serum and we have to tell the truth. We knew that this wasn't a a Big 12 roster, but it's your job to have us at least kind of competitive on the recruiting front. We are in the hotbed of recruiting. There isn't a better place to recruit in the country. And I am not somebody who says we need to build a fence around Houston. I've had this discussion with you guys before that we don't need to just build a fence around Houston. I want the best players that we can get here. But damn, guys, we got a lot of talent in Houston, and we're 96th. We're 96th in 2024. It's unacceptable to be that low and to just say, like, yeah, we've kind of given up, and it kind of is what it is. It's because we didn't have shovels in the ground for our football specific facility. It's bullshit.
So I found the quote.
The whole quote is too long to read.
Yeah.
It's a hefty quote there, but if you got a money shot that you want a money quote that you want to go for, Sam, bring it on.
I think I got a couple money paragraphs if you don't mind.
Do it.
And I'm not gonna do the whole go voice here, but this is a verbatim quote. Shout out to Ryan at Go Cougs for writing about this and having this quote. If you're still trying to recruit 24s right now, referring to the class of 2024, the current senior class, if you're still trying to recruit 24s right now from a high school perspective, you're late, right? So you could say, why isn't your 24 high school recruiting better? It's a good question. It's not great right now. I've said this a lot. If you were still trying to recruit 24s right now from a high school perspective, you're late. So you could say, why isn't the 24 high school recruiting better? It's a good question. It's not great right now. I've said this a lot when it comes to recruiting. For Big 12 recruiting, 24s need to see a Big 12 schedule. They need to see fans in the stands and exciting atmospheres like we witnessed 2 weeks ago. They need to see dirt being moved on.
Give us a reason.
No, Sorry. They fucking don't. That's me editorializing, by the way. And by the way, I was not he was repeating himself. I did not lose my place and start reading the same spot. He kept repeating. And this is what kills me. 24, it's not great right now. I've said it a lot. You have? Jesus Christ. Why? Sorry.
Just running around telling anyone who will listen that you're
hey guys, I don't know if you guys
not great right now. How do the 8 people who are on staff who oversee player development or player personnel and recruiting feel right now? I don't know if I feel bad for them or just hey guys, you 8 people have a full-time fucking job that nobody in UH football history has had before. Why are we the 96th class? I feel ultimately bad for them, but also ugh.
So by the way, 96 may be a little bit generous because I know On Three's got us at 103, I believe. So
24/7 has us at 95. We were 105.
All right. So around 100. We can comfortably say we're around 100 with just 8 committed high school seniors right now. And yeah, kind of mentioned, Dana said this week that, quote, the ship has sailed, end quote, in terms of making significant additions to the 2024 high school class. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't mention it. Maybe my favorite quote was asked if he was going to, talk about still recruiting. He said that they were going to try to, quote, dig some people up, end quote, in recruiting the rest of the way. Which, if you're one of the 2024s that Dana is still talking to, how does that quote make you feel? Oh yeah, you're not some top guy that's just making a decision late, or someone we've been on for a long time and trying to convince together. No, we're trying to dig up a real diamond in the rough, and that's ugh. I mean, if you just look at the 8 guys committed, Maurice Williams in particular, I think real close to being a 4-star in the 247 composite. On Three has him as a 4-star, I believe. But yeah, I mean, you talk about you just can't recruit these guys until they've actually seen you play Big 12 games, and by their senior season, it's too late.
They know we're playing them.
UCF in
took it out of my mind.
In the exact same position as us, has 18 commits in the 2024 class, multiple 4-stars, whatever service you look at. Houston has 8 committed players. And yeah, the current high school seniors recruited when Houston wasn't yet playing in the Big 12, so they hadn't seen the Big 12 home games. And honestly, I think I have to admit, and I'm being genuinely here, I think that is a good excuse. It's a good excuse for not being in the top 30, the top 40, maybe the top 50 nationally with your high school recruiting class. It's not an excuse for why your class is pushing triple digits. Not even fucking close. It just isn't. When you are a team in transition from the American Athletic Conference to the Big 12, playing dead center in the biggest recruiting hotbed in the country, there's never an excuse for having a high school class this sad. And like I said, the proof is that all 3 of the programs that are in essentially the same situation as you, especially UCF, but I mean Cincinnati and BYU as well, recruiting circles around you without the benefit of being located in bleepity bleeping Houston, Texas.
So one of the things I look at is, I'm not by any means a recruiting guru, right? I don't get paid to follow it by any website or anything like that. But like, I look at average recruit, because sometimes you can have a low amount of commits, but you have a lot of high quality guys. Do you think that's the case for us?
Yeah, I think Dustin named our one real. All respect to these young men who are better athletes than I'll ever be.
Oh,
but
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Maurice Williams is the only like real like, oh wow, that guy is like a serious Power 5 recruit level guy.
So we are in terms of average, we are ahead of BYU. We are ahead of Iowa State. And that's it, boys. They are ahead of us because Iowa State has 18 recruits. They don't have any 4-stars. They have a bunch of 3-stars. But guys, when we look at where we sit, like I told you guys, we have 24/7 has us at 95. Who do you think are the teams around us? Like
Toledo.
Toledo.
Name out there.
I'm gonna say.
All right, so number 90 or 89 is Charlotte. 90 is Central Michigan. 91 is Liberty. Marshall's 92. The Ohio Bryces are 93. 94 is San Diego State. We're 95. Guys,
look aside, that's a real insane one too. That like,
yeah, San Diego State.
I know Southern California is, losing population, stuff like that, but still it's Southern California. Like, you still throw a rock and have like
Eastern Michigan is one spot behind us. We're on level with Eastern Michigan.
Eat shit, Eagles.
Like,
let's go.
Fresno State 97.
Great field. We're ahead of you.
Yeah. Sorry. We really own you. Like, South Alabama is 99. What are we doing?
Well, South Alabama beat the hell out of Oklahoma State, something we're probably not going to do. So maybe
fair enough
in recruiting. But yeah, I don't know. Just the last point I was going to make about the recruiting thing is just like, sometimes you're thinking about making a coaching change and you worry about like your recruiting class getting decimated. Guys want to leave. You literally only got 8 guys.
Yeah, now's the time to do it. If you're worried about that, do it. Just do it. Just do it.
I hope that the staff, when it comes in, I hope that, if we do get rid of Dana this offseason, I hope whatever staff comes in, I hope they talk to Maurice Williams. I hope they talk to all 8 of these guys and say, hey, like, let's find out if you're a good fit. We'd, maybe still like to honor the thing, whatever. But you literally only have 8 guys to lose. Make the damn move.
And if like you said, I want them to still talk to the 8. Anybody who wants to be a Cougar, I am a fan of. I will cheer for you till my heart till I can't anymore. And I appreciate anybody who wants to be a Coug. But we have 8 recruits. I'm more worried about the 8 because the average, it's not great, right? But it's fine. 8 recruits, only 8. I'd get fired in my NCAA football dynasty if I only recruited 8. In fact, one of my goals is to sign 10 3-star and higher by the end of the season. If I don't, I get like 5 red arrows. It's ridiculous.
You get virtual Chris Pesman as your boss.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, yeah, the lack of on-field success, the lack of recruiting successes. Like, man, I know Houston isn't a perfect job, and we're, we can talk about Houston, the recruiting area, but like, yes, we can acknowledge Houston's not a perfect job. Like, it's got its shortcomings as well. But like, and yeah, there are lots of areas outside of head football coach that need improving with the football program. I think we would all agree with that as well. But like, good Lord, we can debate who like the best guy to take over for Dana is, but there are just like indisputably so many coaches out there who could do better than this in one or both areas of like recruiting better players or coaching the guys up. Probably both. There's just like, there's got to be so many. There are so many guys you can name that like, I go, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like iffy about him as a head coach, but Lord, I believe he would do better than 96th best recruiting class in Houston. Like, I believe he wouldn't lose to Rice and, essentially throw up 3 shutouts in 5 Big 12 games offensively.
I was just gonna say it's an insane quote for all the reasons I think we've listed, but you know what makes it more insane, guys? He's actually closed strong in the last 2 classes. That guys like Matthew Golden didn't come in until I believe it was Thanksgiving week 2021. Pancake Hunter also when the Oklahoma staff when Lincoln Riley left for USC. Like, this staff has got last year, Michael Harrison Pilot was like a real late commitment. Justin Benton, a fairly late one as well. Your top defensive commitment. Like, this staff has gotten good high school guys after like October. And like, maybe behind closed doors, if you're like, hey guys, like, our priority needs to be the portal. We're just not doing what we do in high school recruiting. Fine. If that's what you want to say to your staff completely internally, understand it. Like, hey, our recruiting priority at this point needs to be transfers because there's a decent chance that we're going to be on borrowed time if we're back in 2024. Totally fine. Totally understand it. But to telegraph that publicly, I mean, what if you're a high school coach who's been like dealing with U of H assistant and has a 2024 recruit who's considering the Cougars? How's that like? That's something you have to consider. Like that, you have to not absolutely burn your bridges with Texas and Houston area high school coaches as well. That's another angle on this. And it's so insane however you slice it. And just, it's almost like begging to be fired behavior. It's almost like he's doing like the guy from Office Space did and just like trying to get, I guess this makes Renu and Tillman and Pesman the Bobs, but just like actively trying to lose his job because he just isn't about it anymore. Like that. And that's an insane thing to say. And I make the Office Space joke to give some levity, but like it reads like a guy trying to get fired. And let's just
don't forget he kept his job though. In Office Space, he kept his job.
Yeah, someone needs to hypnotize him so he gets like his early 2010s playbook back. Sorry, Dustin.
I was gonna make the analogy to the producers, releasing the producers, like they're trying to screw up, but then things go well. He's just trying to screw up and succeeding in screwing up. So I don't know what the pop culture analogy is here that's gonna make me feel better, but
significantly less funny or classic than the producers. Yeah, guys, you want to talk about UH Baylor, a game that you two will be attending in person?
I guess. The good news is it's for only $14. That's with fees. That's with all the fees.
With fees?
I know.
With fees, it was $14.
I was because I've been paying like almost 50% markup every time I buy something through secondary market. That's insane.
Yeah, the ticket was listed at $5, and I paid $9 in fees per ticket.
Yeah, Bobby texts me this week and it's just like, hey, you want me to just get tickets, for a ticket for you with the group, and with having zero conversation whatsoever about what the ticket prices were going to be. I just said yes, knowing that the chances of him coming back with a dollar amount larger than $20 was going to be non-existent. And if he had, it was gonna be like, hey, where the hell did you go? Are we on the 50-yard line, field level?
Sideline passes, Dustin, for $95.
Like, what are these?
Okay, so you said that, but I was like, because my mom's going to be there. They live in Waco, that kind of stuff. Like there's going to be family coming in that want to go to a game and all that kind of stuff. So, but they don't do a lot of games like this, right? Like they do games, but not really.
And they're like, are we going to be once they see the quality of football?
Yeah. And they were like, are we, do we need to get tickets through U of H? Are we going to be sitting there? And I was like, for months, my mom's been worried that like, we're not going to be able to get tickets. And I was like, you have no fear. Don't worry about it. Like we'll get them the week of the game. It'll be fine. And I went to the U of H website just to see how much tickets were going to be just for us. Like maybe they weren't going to be too bad and we could support the university a little bit, give some money that way. Tickets were $100 a pop through U of H.
How could you in good conscience charge $100 for this? Unless that's like, oh, like, hey, this is a premium club. See, how could you sleep at night, U of H, and charge $100 to the people who are ostensibly your most devoted fans?
$100.
I knew you'd say something that would make me feel like that, but I'm incredulous.
$100 per ticket. I bought 7 tickets for $98 on the secondary. So we're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun. It's gonna be a great game.
Yeah. So there's a football game on Saturday.
This is a true anxiety bowl if I've ever seen it. And Dustin will know what that means.
Yeah.
Bobby might not.
What's that? What anxiety bowl?
This game is an anxiety bowl. If I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? You remember that, right? It's a Godfrey term.
Yes.
Bobby, if that's not a familiar term to you, my quick and dirty definition is a matchup where one or both teams involved in this game aren't feeling great about the current season and likely long-term trajectory of the program, and thus the thought of a loss for either fan base in all likelihood is anxiety-inducing. And I would challenge. Yeah,
I think the best definition is it's a game when both teams are looking at the other team and going, "Oh God, please at least don't let us lose to fill in the blank."
Yep.
Yeah. And here we are, boys. Here we are, and it's so fun to be a part of this. And like, I was in Waco this past week, and I had there was a charity golf tournament that I went down and played in for a for a family friend. He bought us tickets into this tournament. And I went down Friday or Thursday night. Tournament was on Friday. Just kind of my dad chose the 8 a.m. tee time because he hates us for some reason. But I went down Thursday, just kind of hang out, see my parents, all that kind of stuff. So I go down and mom's like, all right, so we're talking about the game and everything. She's like, Baylor's just not very good this year. And I was like, us either. And she goes, I think their coach may get fired. My mom, who doesn't really watch football anymore because she was around it all the time when I was growing up, knows enough about Baylor football that their coach may not, she doesn't know the coach's name, but she knows that he's in a spot where he's in a lot of trouble, guys.
Fantastic.
Yeah, basically, I think it's fair to say that Baylor fans don't feel much better about their program and their head coach currently than U of H fans do. 3-5 overall. They can actually claim 2 Big 12 conference wins. They had the miracle comeback versus UCF and a narrow win at Cincinnati. But outside of that, they've looked decidedly second best against UT Austin, Texas Tech, and Iowa State. And of course, that's all on top of, let's not forget, the season opening loss to the Texas State
Bobcats.
Lord, that was embarrassing. I only lived in San Marcos. I only have a t-shirt that says Texas State Bobcats on it, and I just completely blanked on what their mascot was. It's amazing. And yeah, I think as much as, okay, I guess we'll have to break this matchup down. I think the thing that kind of jumps out on the page at first is, they're not very good. Like U of H, they're not very good on either side of the ball, but they're especially not very good defensively, where they're averaging over 5 yards per carry and nearly 8 yards per pass attempt on the season. We talked about, we talked at length about the shutout that the U of H just had handed to them by Kansas State. But this is a get right opportunity for this Cougar offense, if ever there was one. And then, I think that really it is kind of the thing that jumped out at me is that it feels kind of like a mirror of UH in a lot of ways. And the hey, we're not very good. Hey, our coach might get fired, all that. But also, defensively, it's a disaster. And then you look at offensively, okay, that's the semi-respectable group. With Blake Shapen looking healthy at quarterback, they got a stable of running backs doing fine. Is it a good offensive team? No. But U of H is not a good offensive team either. And there's at least some things you can kind of pick out offensively. You got a quarterback who's not awful, but is not really taking that next step to being overall good. Just overall a pretty ugly situation that pretty well mirrors our pretty ugly situation.
Yeah, as the guy who's I'm sorry, sir. As the guy who has kind of been the Baylor guy this year, it's just bad. And like you said, it very much is a mirror of our situation. You just kind of watch it. You see their 2 conference wins. You're like, okay, maybe they're not that bad. They beat a UCF team, still gave up 35 to UCF, a UCF offense that honestly was playing their backup quarterback, didn't look very good, still gave up 35 points to them. And you saw what that UCF offense did when they were at full strength. I have full belief that that UCF may have won that game if they have Plumlee there. So it's if you're a Baylor fan, you're definitely looking at this, like you guys said, the anxiety bowl is definitely a thing. But yeah, it's not going to be good football this weekend for sure. Go ahead, Sam.
I was gonna say the only thing that worries me, for all their offensive flaws, Baylor can throw the ball a bit, and now that Blake Shapen is back and I think healthy, I mean, if you've watched any U of H defense this season, stopping an opposing passing attack basically hasn't happened since, I guess, Sam Houston week. Shapen's done a really good job taking care of the football too, throwing 1 pick in 186 attempts, and some of that is probably offense design, but I think Shapen should certainly get at least some credit here for 1 pick in 186 attempts. I have a really veteran receiver group too. Really speedy, diminutive guy, Monterey Baldwin, who leads the Bears in receiving yards, receptions, tied for their lead in receiving touchdowns, has had 300+ yard receiving efforts in his last 4 games, including 150 in that crazy comeback that Bobby talked about against UCF. The one thing I will say, though, passing game for the Bears, really productive statistically, but also has really struggled in the most important part of the field. I mean, the last time this team had multiple passing touchdowns was week 1 against Texas State. The return of Shapen after he missed a few games definitely has made Baylor a more efficient and way less turnover prone offense, but hasn't really changed their ability to actually turn those passing yards into touchdowns, turn those passing yards into points. And I think the thing that's really plagued the Bears has been I think you said like decent running back performance, Dustin. Man, this might be the worst rushing team in the conference. I mean, if you take out their week 3 win over Long Island, an FCS team in week 3, they're averaging 86 rush yards per game. And that's not because this is an air raid offense that doesn't try to run the ball. They try to run the ball and they do it very, very badly. Dominic Richardson leads them in rush yards, but doesn't have a rush touchdown this season. He has their longest run this season, guys, 32 yards. Like, it takes a lot for the Cougar rushing attack to look at by comparison and be like, yeah, there's something here. Like Parker Jenkins, and the run blocking has been a little bit better against some of the lower end opponents recently. Maybe you could do something here, but just like, if the Bears are able to run the ball down the Cougars' throat on Saturday, I don't think anything would be more demoralizing for me. Like, they might tear up the secondary because, quite frankly, anyone with a pulse has torn up the secondary. But this defensive front has actually shown occasional signs of life this season. Has actually shown, like, recently, periodic abilities like West Virginia and the Longhorns to actually stop the run. If you can't do it on Saturday in Waco, I mean, I don't think this team. I mean, if you don't win this game, period, I don't know if this team has another win in them this year. But certainly, if you can't take care of that, you can't take care of that aspect of this game. Don't have any faith that anything good is going to happen the rest of this year.
Like I said, as though we don't play Cincinnati and UCF, 2 teams that Baylor has actually beaten like the rest of the year. Like, you maybe forget how bad a lot of the rest of our schedule is, but no, it is. It would definitely be, again, like against a defense that has been this bad. It would be.
I think you're forgetting how bad we are.
You're right. Cincy is very bad, Dustin. But
like, Cincy's bad.
Don't tell me we can't Don't tell me we can't lose that game. You're right. Like,
we absolutely can.
Right.
We absolutely can.
Yeah,
I'm just saying we absolutely can lose to Baylor and beat Cincinnati and or UCF. I think that is entirely possible given just all those teams respectively. But
yes, I don't disagree with you. But also,
100. If
did you watch last week?
No, fair enough. But. If this offense, I will agree at the very least. If this offense isn't scoring points with regularity against this defense, that would be a pretty grim state of affairs. Blake Shapen, if he's healthy, going against the secondary might be pretty grim, regardless. And if Baylor is just running the ball against us, I mean, again, as bad as things were last week, man. We know how much things change from one week to the next. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, holy crap, we just looked really good stopping the UT like rushing attack, and then a week later it's, hey, we barely got in the way as K-State like marched down the field rushing the ball as much as they wanted to, and then so who knows, who the hell knows where the pendulum swings this week, I guess. But there's the potential for some pretty I don't know, maybe there's the potential to see something ugly enough that it forces a leadership change here, because This is a pretty rough Baylor team, and yet I have very little confidence that we're going to actually go in there and beat them.
One thing I'd pay attention to is our defensive line getting to the quarterback. They've given up 23 sacks in 8 games this year. So, in as much as we have complained about the defense stuff, we've gotten to the quarterback the last couple of weeks. And we've at least disrupted. I mean, we didn't disrupt too much last week, but we got to the quarterbacks. And we at least made them get rid of the ball quickly. Now, granted, he had plenty of space and open receivers, but if we can kind of bully their offensive line and really get some stuff going, I think that could be somewhere where we can win this ball game.
Yeah, it's the worst offensive line we're going to see in Big 12 play this year. I feel very confident saying that, even with not so great Cincy and UCF teams in the future schedule, this has been a very, very bad offensive line in basically any of the ways you could judge an offensive line. I don't know if I have any more thoughts about this football game. I don't know if I want to think about this football game anymore between now and about 12:30 my time when I put it on Saturday.
I've already exhausted my notes in this game. I've already said more words about this game than I intended to. So,
you know what's going to happen? This game's going to be like 56-49, right?
I mean, both these defenses are so bad that seems very much within the realm of possibility. I would not argue with that.
Like, it's going to be 56-49 or 10-3. Like, it's going to be there will not be a 35-28 game or like a 24-21. It's going to be no one scores and the offenses just look god awful, or the defenses look god awful. This is not your classic matchup of good versus good or bad versus, like, it's just all around bad.
It's not a classic matchup in any definition.
No.
All right. Well, staying with football for a real little bit before we move on, we did want to mention that the Big 12, I believe just today, in fact, this afternoon announced the Big 12 football conference home and road pairings for the next 4 seasons going forward with the new 16-team conference that will take shape starting in the 2024 season. And I think the headliner for me was, you see Houston, kind of like you expected, only 4 home games next year, and then 2 years after that, 2026, and then 5 home games the odd seasons 2025 and 2027. Aside from that, I think the only thing I really cared about was how many home games, or not home games, but I guess games broadly, Houston was going to get against the other Texas teams in the Big 12, because certainly was a huge draw of joining the Big 12 was rekindling those rivalries. And with a 16-team conference, you weren't going to get all 3 of Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor on your schedule every year. But the conference, I think, did honestly as well as I could have expected to see in that department. They gave Houston a home game and a road game against a Texas school every year for the next 4 years. And in 2025, Houston will actually host Texas Tech and TCU and travel to Baylor and get all 3 of them on the schedule for one of those 4 years. So I think 9 games against Texas teams in the Big 12 over 4 seasons is something that we're certainly happy with, given that we saw some of the ideas that were thrown out there in terms of how to kind of group these teams might have been pretty rough for the Cougs had they been adopted, in terms of actually getting to see, not that we don't want to see the rest of the teams in the conference as well, not that we're excited about some Western road trips and whatnot, but I think getting to see those local teams on a pretty regular basis was good and exciting. And I think another sign that the Big 12 is kind of thinking about the importance of keeping these Texas rivalries fresh and valuing that the way that I think we are as well.
I saw some complaining about Iowa State, K-State not being a protected game, but I don't do an Iowa State or K-State podcast, so I'm not going to weigh in on that one strongly either way. I don't know, goes into logistically making a schedule. I think you're doing a 16-team conference schedule, you're going to make someone unhappy with some decision that gets made. I think you probably could. I don't know. I don't know all the machinations, but you probably could have made Iowa State, K-State protected. I don't know. Not going to weigh in on it anymore. Selfishly enjoying as someone who lives in the western part of the country, Arizona and Arizona State and BYU and Utah happening in not too long from now. So appreciate that. And like you, don't have much original to add. That just appreciate that we're going to be seeing at least 2 Texas teams in conference play. Because like I was seeing like examples of, we can make a pod that's U of H, West Virginia, UCF, and Cincy. And it's like, cool. I want to drink bleach at being a pod with UCF, Cincy, and West Virginia. And thankfully, not something like that happening.
Yep. All I got to add is I'm happy that I get to see the TCU games and Baylor games. I get those. Those are easy roadies for me. TCU being 30 minutes away and Baylor with my parents living in Waco is really nice.
All right, before we get to our big story of the men's basketball season preview, we did want to talk about another Cougar sport that is in season, and that's the Cougar Volleyball program, which got a nice road sweep over Cincinnati this weekend on Sunday. We got basically one close set in the match, and that was the first one where Houston played extremely sloppy and nonetheless still had enough about them to hold off the Bearcats 25-20. And, watching this match, you go, oh, man, if we're going to play at that level and we still win the set by 5 points, then Cincinnati is in trouble here. And that turned out to be true. Houston dominated the Bearcats the next 2 sets, 25-13, 25-11. And just crazy good defense from Houston in this one. Cincinnati had more attack errors than kills in both of the second and third sets, as well as the match as a whole, which gave them a negative hitting percentage very humorously. So, I expected Houston to win this one. I even expected a sweep probably, but I don't know if even I expected Houston to be this dominant. So really excited to see them get the win and get back to 500 in conference play.
I mean, this was a Cincy team that had only been swept twice in 10 conference matches prior to this one. I mean, like you, Dustin, one I definitely expected the Cougars to win, one that I probably would have expected them to sweep, but I think to zoom out a second, that I would have expected wins in these last 3 matches, the 2 in Lubbock against Texas Tech and this one at Cincy, but I don't know if I would have expected the Cougs to just go win all 9 sets and most of those 9 sets not be especially close. But this was a really outstanding effort by the Cougs. Wasn't an offensive explosion like you said, but forcing more attack errors than kills. Not a bad day's work for the Cougs defensively. And I thought from watching this one, you wouldn't have, I think if you just looked at the box score, she wouldn't have been the first name you'd seen, but I thought Katie Corelli was really valuable for the Cougs. 5 kills and 5 total blocks. Really versatile player. One that I think is playing some of a secondary role with some really good super seniors on this team, but I think someone who's shown herself to be Cougar volleyball quality for the future when she's, ends up being one of your super seniors. 46 digs from the team in 3 sets, nothing to sneeze at either. I think in the most positive way possible, it was just a really no nonsense workman-like performance. Wasn't a lot of sexy offensive stuff happening, but it was almost like the volleyball equivalent of what K-State did to us. Just, you never really let it be that close and just emphatically beat them, left no doubt at any point. And thought that was really impressive. The exact kind of dominance I think you needed to see after that really brutal slate to start the season.
Yep. I'm looking at my notes here. I have not much to add on that. We looked dominant, exactly what you wanted to see. We spoke, coming into this stretch that there were going to be some games matches that we were going to need to bounce back, get that conference record up, go be the dominant team that we know that we could be against some of these lower Big 12 teams. And we did it. So tough to say much more than what you guys did in terms of the statistical side as well.
5th straight win for the Molly Alvey Trophy, which I definitely didn't just make up in my head 30 seconds ago while Bobby was talking.
Very nice.
I could see it in your face. You were like, I have a joke for this.
The light bulb. You just saw the light bulb literally.
Yeah, just, okay.
So he has an obscure U of H sports joke to make.
Above his head hasn't been the entire time. It just went on when he had that idea. So Houston gets back to 5-5 in conference play. Still, I believe another week at number 22 in the national rankings, and a big couple of weekend matches when they'll be hosting I believe it's the Central Florida Golden Knights is the name of that program for matches.
Named after the Vegas hockey team.
Absolutely.
They're like, this team's a winner. We need to attach ourselves to that winner. Definitely didn't have the nickname beforehand.
But no, so matches on Friday and Saturday. The Knights stand at 17-5 overall, an impressive 8-3 mark in conference play that puts them 2.5 games ahead of Houston. But very notably, when you look at the teams that have given Houston their 5 losses, also the 3 teams that RPI says are the 3 best teams in the conference, UT Austin, BYU, and Kansas. UCF hasn't played any of those teams yet, so I think that is certainly a factor in UCF being ahead of Houston in the standings right now. They are, I believe, is number 42 in the RPI at the moment. I thought I had it in my notes, but apparently not. Hitting an impressive 277 as a team. Very nice offensive number there, led by Emily Wilson, who just kind of real surprisingly played very sparingly last year, but this time around really shining, leading the team with 266 kills, but really a lot of offensive depth. They've got 5 players who are averaging, I want to say 2 kills. I think one is averaging like 1.99, but we'll just round it up and say they got 5 players that are averaging two kills per set. So really a lot of players to look out for when you're trying to defend that team. So I think really big matches. These are 2 teams that split these 2 matches within that they played last year. They split the 2 matches that they played the year before that. They've split the last 2 matches that have been played in Houston. They're 14-14 all time against each other. And both of these teams, I think, are pretty, if not really good this year. So I expect these matches to be extremely close. And kind of like we talked about, that's the close matches are the ones where quite often the fans end up making the difference. So as always, I want to really, really encourage everyone listening, if you can, to make it out to the Fertitta Center this weekend.
Yeah, would just add, they've kind of had the opposite of U of H's Big 12 schedule. It's a real backloaded schedule. I mean, not their fault. They didn't pick the schedule, but kind of explains why they're 8-3 in conference play and U of H is 5-5, and UCF has never moved out of receiving votes, and U of H has never moved out of the top 25. So they did split last week with a fine but not great TCU team. Still think it's a good team, though. Still think it's a team that's going to challenge the Cougs more than the last couple weeks' opponents have by a good amount. I think it's pretty remarkable that they're in this decent shape to be a postseason team, considering they lost one of the best players. I think maybe the best player in program history, McKenna Melville, one of the better offensive players that college volleyball has seen recently. She exhausted her eligibility after last season. Also saw their longtime head coach do kind of a semi-retirement move during the offseason, leaving UCF to take a job in kind of a new pro volleyball league, though first-year head coach Jenny Maurer was the associate head coach the last 5 seasons in Orlando. You mentioned Emily Wilson. Dustin did a really nice job kind of stepping into the role vacated by Melville, though no one has truly stepped into it. It's a pretty balanced offensive team, 17th in the country in hitting percentage, though I don't think you can totally untangle that number from their not so great conference schedule to start the season. But again, we'll say what Dustin said here too. If you're going to be in or near Houston this weekend, really get on over the Fertitta Center. It's good opponent. U of H is going to need a good crowd to try to pick up a pair of really important conference wins here. I remember last year's team, that UCF game being your big and maybe lone real serious conference opponent, and that big win, I think, really being a turning point for that team. And again, hope all of y'all can give them an equally nice crowd on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, just to harp on the crowd thing, just remember last year we took the game at home because we had that big crowd and everything was going well. And then when we went back there, final match of the season, it was a close one and they took it from us. So just the crowd actually does make a pretty big difference. And if you can get out there, go support the ladies, and go watch a really fun sport to watch in person.
You don't need to know a lot about it. You don't need to know like the substitution patterns. You just need to know the
ball goes in square. Ball goes in square.
Ball goes in square. Ball needs to go over the net. Ball can't touch the same team a certain number of times. That's it. You have the basic level of knowledge to watch and enjoy a college volleyball game.
There you go.
All right, and then let's keep it moving by talking Cougar men's basketball, guys. It is finally here this coming Monday. Is the season opener. We are now just you can count on one hand the number of days between right now and when we are going to be watching the Houston Cougar men's basketball playing regular season games. And obviously just, I think top level, you got to start by just kind of stating the obvious. It's a hugely intriguing season in terms of taking a Houston team that has gone to 4 straight Sweet 16s, has finished 6 straight seasons in the top 25, and you're putting them in the toughest and the deepest conference in the country. So I think certainly big picture, there's a lot going on in terms of, redefining success. Houston has lost 26 total games over the last 5 years, basically 5 losses per season. Even a best case Houston season this year, you're gonna lose more than 5 games. I think we probably all agree on that one. So, I think certainly a lot of changes, both in terms of who you're playing, both in terms of how you define success, and also, in terms of your roster with Marcus Sasser and Jarris Walker going pro, Tremont Mark hitting the transfer portal, and then a number of new players in. So I think, a lot of things are changing, but I think I'm really excited to see some of the new guys coming in, and I think one of the things that's not going to change is it's not just about the new players. It's not just about what's Eldrick Cryer going to do. It's not just about what's Damian Dunn going to do. I think the thing that's not going to change is we've seen this consistently, no matter no matter what level we're recruiting at. Obviously we're recruiting at a lower level when the coaching staff first got here, recruiting at a much higher level now. This has always been a development program. This has always been, we've made the joke how many times about progress just isn't directly linear in sports unless you're being coached by Kelvin Sampson, in which case you'd magically just get linearly better year on year. So, it's not just what are the new guys going to do. It's what is, Juwan Roberts going to look like with another year in this program. It's what's JVA Francis going to look like with another year in this program. All those guys coming back as well. So, I think that's just kind of my overall big picture first thought is, there's a whole lot that's gonna change this year around this program. But just in terms of expecting to see this team play their ass off, the identity being the same, the development program being the same, I think that is something that we're not going to see change this year.
Yeah, we're, no matter who comes in, no matter what player, it's the same program. We're gonna play defense. We're gonna beat you ugly. We're gonna get rebounds. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Kelvin Sampson will actually put a dome on top of the basket where
But Bobby, then no shots can go in.
Yeah, no shots go in, but it'll bounce off in random directions. Just a fun fact. I don't know if you guys had heard that, but
should let every TV guy who has a U of H game know this so they can mention it 17 times a broadcast.
But like you said, losing Jarris, losing Sasser, losing Mark, RIP Reggie Chaney, losing Reggie Chaney is, it's tough, and it's not just statistically tough, right? You lose those guys, you lose a lot of production from your basketball team, but you also lose the leadership. I mean, that was a big thing that everyone talked about with Reggie Chaney is Reggie Chaney was Cougar basketball, right? He fit the grit. He did the hard work. He, you lose that. So now it's going to be who's going to step up in that role. I don't think that we're going to have any problems filling their the statistics that they had, right? But losing Sasser, losing Chaney, you're losing core members of your leadership team. Who steps up and fills that role this year, right? You're going to have Cryer come in. He's going to be able to offset some of the Sasser, right? Damian Dunn's going to come in. Like, you have the people who are going to come in physically and to get you the points, but what does it look like, the leadership on this team? And I know, and I have the confidence, unlike our football team, I have the confidence in our head coach here that he's built a culture that he has. Somebody's going to step up. It's been a concern in the past, right? Oh, who's going to step up this year? And somebody always steps up and just becomes that leader of the team since he's been here.
And I guess the good news with that, obviously acknowledging the title, you're not replacing Reggie Chaney, the person, like, in this program. So I want to make it clear that that is not what I'm referring to here. But I think the good news with the Kelvin Sampson program is so many of the last handful of years, you've had to replace key guys. After the 2018 season, you had to replace Rob Gray and Devin Davis. After the 2019 season, you had to replace Galen Robinson, Corey Davis Jr. Again, gonna forget guys here. So if you're like, how did you not mention the 2020 season? You lost Chris Harris, who ended up being a really nice shot blocker by his career, and Nate Hinton, who was just kind of a classic Kelvin Sampson do everything guy. Quentin Grimes after the 21 season, after last year, a lot, the veteran guys from that team, Tajay, Fabian, Kyler Edwards, and this year losing all the guys that you both have talked about. Like, I think just you're not going to replace necessarily what those guys brought, but it's not a new thing for Kelvin Sampson. And that's a good thing. It's not necessarily a new thing to, hey, we're moving on to this new group of guys, but you have the same kind of connecting Kelvin Sampson program tenants and things that no matter if it's LJ Cryer or Damian Dunn and Jamal Shed in the backcourt, or if it's, Rob Gray and Galen Robinson 5 years ago, you're going to expect this team to do certain things no matter who's in the court. And that's exciting thing. That's been the joy of following Cougar men's basketball as it's become what it's become here the last 5 years. My first point, I think I'm really excited about, again, even acknowledging losing Sasser from this backcourt, losing Tremont Mark as well, absolutely stacked. You have so many options for good players who are going to start alongside, I think, the presumed point guard starter, Jamal Shed, and obviously LJ Cryer didn't come here to not get on the court as well. I mean, just so many good options. Emmanuel Sharp started the exhibition against UNC Pembroke. Could see him. Terrence Arsenault has played in kind of that small forward, big guard role as well. I think you can make a case for a couple of guys there, and that's exciting that you have, I think, two guys really in Sharp and Arsenault, who you don't necessarily know if they're going to be their sophomore season, but I think they both were positives for a lot of their freshman year, acknowledging that unlike Jarris Walker, like, these weren't guys like Jarris Walker, who's just freakishly ready for his assuredly 1 year college career. You knew when they came to the program, Sharp and likely Arsenault be multi-year guys. And I'm excited to see in a Kelvin Sampson program where, like you said, Dustin, you just take it for granted that guys are going to improve year on year, at least to some degree, what this year's version of Emmanuel Sharp and Terrence Arsenault looks like. Because I think you can kind of pencil in what Jamal Shed and LJ Cryer are going to be, but that's kind of the exciting unknown, is that third guard and what that backcourt's going to look like. I think a lot of good options there.
I was going to say Shed, Cryer, and even Damian Dunn, I think, kind of guys
Damian Dunn as well, yeah.
Have been in college basketball long enough that, not to say that, again, even guys like that, you expect them to continue getting better. But, with that as a pretty solid foundation in terms of, having Jamal Shed, I really think one of the best point guards in the country. LJ Cryer, I really think one of the best scoring guards in the country. Damian Dunn, a guard with the ability to get to the line that Kelvin Sampson has never had at Houston, certainly. So I think that's your starting. And then you talk about, what's the joke about the best thing about freshmen is that they become sophomores. And yeah, we already saw some exciting stuff, like you mentioned, from Arsenault and Sharp last year. And then, now you have what is quite often your biggest leap is the leap you make between your freshman and your sophomore seasons. What does that look like for Terrence Arsenault, a guy that you see a lot of NBA analysts talking about, someone that they expect to play at the next level, whether it's in a year or 2 years from now. What does that mean for Emmanuel Sharp, a guy who came in and just right away as a freshman had no fear about putting the ball up and just showed that he could score, basically, that as soon as he stepped on the court that he was within range and that he could score points in a hurry. What does he look like now, with another year in this program? And heck, even guys that no one's really talking about. I mean, Ramon Walker took a medical redshirt last year. I would love to see what he can do as a healthy, experienced collegiate. Malik Wilson, someone that entered the portal and came back. We've kind of forgotten about him, but he was a solid mid-major starter for 2 years and then an important role player for a good Texas Tech team. So, I think the fact that we're going to see 4 guard lineups this year is kind of a given based on, the amount of depth that we have at guard. but man, it's hard not to be excited about that because that's just 1 through 7 or whatever that is. Like that's all guys that you go, man, that this guy can play at the college level. You'd expect this guy to be someone who is playing significant minutes and making positive contributions at the college level. Just it's hard to overstate what an exciting and relatively proven guard group this is.
Yeah, I don't think you have the depth in the front court, but I think one guy that I would say I'm equally excited to see what his development looks like, Javier Francis. I think last year was technically a sophomore last year, but last year was really well and truly the first year Francis played meaningful minutes, and that wasn't necessarily consistent. I think you saw him almost hit kind of a freshman wall, maybe like 2/3, 3/4 into the season. We kind of look at the game by game and see his contributions kind of taper off, but man, you saw mouth-watering flashes in terms of a guy who can offensive rebound at a level I'm not sure we've seen consistently in this program, a guy who can block shots and even showed a little bit of a soft touch shooting against Pembroke. And again, I know somewhere Kelvin Sampson is like fuming because somebody is like reading too much into a Division II exhibition, which I am doing right now, but I thought we saw a guy who looked a little more confident in his skin out there. Francis did against Pembroke, even acknowledging low level competition, that we're not truly gonna see him go against a opponent where we can really tell something about for a while. But I think we're gonna see a better player when it's all said and done. I think like the two freshmen that are now sophomores, I think how much you see of Francis, I think does have a pretty outsized impact on what the Cougar ceiling is this year.
Absolutely. And like Dustin said, the guard play is going to determine how far this team goes, but it seems to be a thing that we have depended on since Sampson got here. And I think the front court, like you guys said, leaves a little bit to be desired. And I know we have the scholarship tracker and you kind of look at it and we keep going every year like, oh, are we going to bring in a big? Maybe we get a big. I think we may use this one for a big, but I really like the fact that we are just bringing in guys, just studs who can come in and play basketball. Just come in, play basketball, be a Kelvin Sampson guy, and you're going to see the court. You're going to play. And Arsenault, he made some big steps last year. He had, coming in as a freshman, he kind of didn't play very much at the first half of the season, but he played a key role in a couple of games where he was just coming in and didn't show any fear of throwing it up there. And him and Emmanuel Sharp, you got to be excited when you know that your freshmen don't have any fear from their coach of throwing it up and making buckets for you. And let's see how they go in year 2.
You mentioned it. Like one moment for Arsenault for me where I thought he really showed you what he could be capable of long-term here. When I went to Eugene to see the Cougars play, he was really important. He was a really important player at Oregon. Like you had Sasser off the court with foul trouble for a lot of that game. You had guys just maybe not playing up to their usual level. And that guy, I wouldn't say Oregon is the most hostile you may ever see, but that court has like the student section right on top of you. And once he started hitting shots, they were on his ass and no fear. Like he was making tough shots, and I think played a big role in the Cougars being able to get that road win. And again, like it was a freshman season. So I think it was a Virginia also he played. I don't know if he had a ton of points that one, but played more than we expected and played positive minutes while some Cougars were in foul trouble, and what ended up being a hugely important road win for last year's team. So you've seen the composure. You've seen a guy who's ready for the big moment. I think he probably played more tournament minutes than he expected just because of foul trouble here and there in the Cougars last postseason. But it's now about seeing it more consistently. And yeah, really excited to see what's next for him. So I'm curious, guys, what are the non-conference and Big 12 games that, because we at the podcast here don't have to be, focused on the next game. We can focus on whatever the hell we want for the season. I want you both, for whatever reasons you have. It doesn't have to be like, if you don't pick Kansas, I'll be like, yeah, Dustin, but why didn't you pick Kansas? That's the highest ranked opponent. Like, what is the non-conference and conference games you're both most excited about?
Oh man, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. I wasn't ready for that question.
Me neither. I'm like, hold on, let's go to the schedule.
Ambush journalism at its finest here.
We'll put a pin in this because I definitely want to come back and talk about the court some more than we have as well. But I mean, I think for non-conference, that I think that A&M game is probably up there for me, just because they have a lot of hype around them this year. So, that's not to say that they're going to live up to it for sure, but that's a game that if you've got a U of H team and an A&M team that are, maybe both top 15, top 10 type of teams heading into that game, which feels very possible with that game at the Toyota Center, that feels like that could be a really explosive atmosphere. And like, I keep forgetting that game is even on the schedule. Like the number of times that I've seen that game and go, oh shit, I forgot we were playing A&M this year. Nice. But now that it's firmly kind of in the front of mind. Yeah. As many people as are really hyping them up heading into the season, I think that's a really exciting one. And then in conference play, I mean, I know you said I don't have to pick Kansas, but I'd be lying if I picked anybody other than Kansas. I mean, that's how long have we been talking about that? I feel like it's been years and years we've been talking about like, oh, if U of H gets an invite to the Big 12 or gets an invite to the Pac-12 or gets an invite to the ACC, like, which one would you pick? And genuinely one of the things that I like that, and say, I know you guys have both heard me say this, is just like one of the arguments that I would always like put out there in favor of the Big 12 is just like, yeah, but like playing games at Allen Fieldhouse, are you kidding me? Like that's awesome. Like who doesn't want to be in a conference with, again, it's a fantastic conference. It's also what they won. I think it's 19 of the last 22 a regular season championships. So to get to test yourself in Allen Fieldhouse, to get to close out the regular season by hosting the Jayhawks in the Fertitta Center. And I'm hoping to complete my trifecta and see U of H and Kansas play in 3 different places in the same calendar year and see them in Mexico City next December. So getting to see the Jayhawks a couple times already this season, going to be a lot of fun.
I think for me, the Xavier game, and not because, I'm super excited about playing Xavier or anything like that, but it feels nice to be part of one of those like ESPN fake challenges where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're in the Big East Big 12 battle. Like no one ever did that with the American, right? It wasn't ever like the American versus the MAC, battle for the, like, no, we're going to be advertised on like ESPN when we're watching other games. Like, oh, check it out. We got the Big East Big 12 battle. So I know that sounds kind of lame, but it's kind of fun to be a part of something like that. So, and then, sorry, Sam, I'm going to take this one from you, but hosting Texas, hard not to be excited about that one. Traveling to Baylor, that's going to be a fun game. Baylor.
Do you know if their new arena will be open by then?
I don't think it will be, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't hold me to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun going down to Baylor for that game as well.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 choices for the non-conference. I didn't think about that. I'm not going to make a full-throated case for Texas State here. I would say you guys both good answers there. I'm curious to see what they do at the Shriners Children's Charleston Classic, though. I mean, again, it's Utah and Wake Forest are your possible opponents there. Solid teams. A better test for what you are than A&M Corpus for the team we're going to probably talk about for a very short amount of time at the end of this, UL Monroe. But yeah, 2 really good games there. Well, no, I think hosting K-State, like, again, would put Kansas and Texas over that, but like K-State was sneaky really good last year, guys. I think that's going to be a good game at the Fertitta Center. It's a Saturday late morning game, so hopefully not a late arriving crowd there, because I think that'll be a really good one. I'm sure we'll be on some kind of over air television. So that's a good one. Though obviously would slot Kansas and the Horns before it. Sorry, Dustin, didn't mean to left turn away from the team itself, though. I just had that thought in my head. I was like, I'm going to ask it before I forget.
No, it's all good. But I did want to kind of circle back to a couple things that I think both of y'all had kind of talked about. And, Bob, you mentioned not going after or not necessarily not going after, but not landing a forward in the portal. And, that is something that I certainly expected heading into this offseason with just 2 non-freshman forwards, on the roster this year, that you would go out and get a guy in the portal. But, I think there was a really interesting thing that Kelvin Sampson said kind of after the portal kind of closed, which is like, hey, you go out in the portal and get a guy, like you're making a trade. You're not being additive. You're making a trade, because if you go out and get someone who's going to expect to start in the front court next year, you're not going to hold on to Juwan Roberts and Javier Francis, because those guys both expect to start in the front court next year. And you know what? Rightly so. Like those 2 guys are a really exciting 1-2 punch, like in the front court. And Javier, Francis, Sam, you mentioned, as excited as you are for him, those 2 guys are both elite on the glass. Wani, a really good shot blocker. JVA, an elite shot blocker. And we saw Wani took a huge step forward last year offensively beyond what I think any of us expected. Ended up averaging double-figure scoring, something that was not on any of our bingo cards heading into last season. And I think it's really interesting with Javier kind of being like a year behind Wani in the development timeline. I think it's really easy to see that, Wani's first year wasn't really there offensively. It just wasn't really up to speed. 2 years ago, you kind of saw the seeds getting planted where you go, okay, he's kind of figuring some things out. And then last year, all of a sudden, it was like 2 years ago, it was like gaining traction. And then all of a sudden at the beginning of last year, like the tires caught, they made purchase with the ground, and he just like took off like a shot more than any of us expected to. And I really feel like JVR is on the same path. His first year didn't really play very many minutes at all. I don't know, scored any more points, and then maybe threw down a couple of lobs. And then last year, I think certainly early on, he was throwing on the lobs, but I think you kind of saw him over the course of the year starting to plant some of those seeds where he was getting more used to the college game. He was starting to think about, how to find his shots offensively and how to make an impact offensively. And this is the year that I think there's a really good chance that we could really see him take off in a way that most people aren't going to be expecting heading into the year. The talent is there, the athleticism is there. So I think we have a chance to have, I think regardless, both with Wani and with Javier, probably offense is not going to be their strongest suit, right? They're probably going to be guys who are rebounders and defenders and shot blockers first, and then offensive players. But I think both of these guys, not just, certainly Wani was a 10-point a game scorer. You certainly expect him to be an offensive contributor, but I think it's really entirely possible we're going to see both of these guys contribute offensively. And then, man, talking about the forwards, we got to talk about JoJo Tugler, someone that basically since the moment he got to campus, anytime anyone would ask about him or would listen, Kelvin Sampson would go, hey, this guy has to see the court. And Kelvin Sampson, we certainly know about him. He's not someone who's going to throw a freshman out there just to throw him out there. He's not anyone who's going to be impressed with or give a shit about recruiting rankings and play a guy based on that. If Kelvin Sampson is saying this guy has got to play, it's because this guy is ready to be a high-level impact player at the college level. I'm significantly less sure what we're going to see from said lot and Jacob McFarland, the other freshman bigs this year. McFarland, I think in particular, has a body type that I would associate with needing a year or two to acclimate to the college game. But and both of those guys are guys that I think you've seen Sampson talking more about developing them over the long term than necessarily what they're going to do right away this year. So, I think you do have to mention only having 3 guys that you feel real confident with being on the court against good teams in big minutes that are forwards is a little bit scary, especially if injuries hits 1 or 2 of those guys. Knock on wood, like don't want to speak that into existence, but you never know. But man, just like if those 3 do stay healthy, that's a 3-man forward rotation that's going to be really damn good. I think it's going to complement Houston when they inevitably play 4-guard lineups. And given how incredibly deep that, kind of like we talked about, the guard group is, I think it's a talented enough front court staying healthy that it really there's no ceiling for what Houston as a team can accomplish this year.
Yeah, I was talking about JVA's big jump from potentially last year to this year, but man, like Wani had such a jump from 2 years ago to last year.
It was absolutely amazing.
If you had told me about 12 months ago, like, hey, I can give you Wani's at 7.5 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, and better offensive efficiency numbers, I would bit your hand off that. I'm like, oh, good. He's taking a step forward. He's somebody who's at least playable as a potential starting front court guy. And we got something so much better than that from him. And I think, again, it would be bad to assume that last year is the end of the development. They're obviously going against a much tougher level of conference competition week in, week out, but I expect we'll see a better player. How much better, I think, TBD at this point, but I think we'll see a better player. And I think it'll help him also to be playing his more natural position, though. It is nice to have that versatility now, to know that you can run Wani out there at the 5, and it's not some weird, ill-fitting, maybe a little bit situation. He's played a full season there. He's probably a better fit at the 4, but I think that's great to have in your back pocket as well, especially with some potential 4-guard lineups in the horizon. The fact that you're probably not going to be the point where Francis is playing 35 minutes a game. He's just probably not there yet, might not ever be there. But yeah, again, I was also going to say, before you mentioned Tugler, I was just like, God, we are failing, if nothing else, in not mentioning JoJo Tugler. My first impression of him watching that Pembroke scrimmage was, after a few minutes, I was just like, I can't believe this guy's a freshman. Like, if you just turned on this game and kind of got a sense of him playing and watched a few minutes, and I think you asked anyone, like, is that guy, what classification is he? I guarantee you would at least get sophomore or junior. He just did not look at all I think, out of sync. And you see even in exhibition situations, young guys maybe not be ready for the speed of Division I basketball. And I think, like you, Dustin, it's hard not to see Kelvin Sampson be this effusive about a freshman, something he's not inclined to do, and not to really feel like the sky's the limit for this guy. Just everything about Tugler screams Kelvin Sampson, Houston Cougar basketball player. And it's really exciting to have that kind of guy joining your rotation this year. That he does all the Kelvin Sampson nitty gritty things and also has like a top 100 recruiting pedigree as well. I think he's going to be a really good one here in this program for the next few years.
Absolutely. Like you said, you watched him in the scrimmage, and he did not look like a freshman for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even back when Houston did the intra-squad scrimmage a month or two ago, and I went to that one, and yeah, that was, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about Sedlot or Jacob McFarland, who I think could very well, if it's not this year, but maybe at some point in the future, be really good forwards for us. But you watch them play in that game, and they're both doing some things, right? They're both doing some nice things. They both didn't look completely lost out there, against college competition, but you both watching both of those guys, you kind of go, okay, yeah, well, those guys, they still kind of look like freshmen. Excuse me. Getting used to the college game. But yeah, Jojo Tugler does not look that way. He looks like someone that, kind of like he says, expects to contribute right away. And yeah, when Kelvin Sampson says this guy has to get on the court, that's only a good sign. The only last note I had is, I guess we're going to be pretty effusive about this program when we talk about it, for good reason, because they've been unbelievable the last several years. So, I guess kind of like my one question mark that I'll throw out there is, just with the likelihood, kind of like we talked about, of seeing a strong amount of four guard lineups, I'm curious how that does impact Houston's kind of their calling card under Kelvin Sampson, which is the rebounding. I expect this will still be a pretty elite offensive rebounding team under. That's kind of the seems like the most predictable thing in the world under Kelvin Sampson. But also, you look at, the last few years, the last 3 years, in fact, Houston has been outside the top 100 nationally in terms of their defensive rebounding percentage. And, I think as much as we've been supportive of the four guard idea and say, hey, these are some of the teams that are beating you in the tournament, I like that Houston's kind of leaning into being able to play that way. Does that ding you up a little bit in terms of what you're doing in terms of defensive rebounding? And we've talked about it so many times, is you don't want to give up a ton of offensive rebounds, and all of a sudden you're negating the benefit that you would otherwise have by grabbing a bunch of offensive rebounds yourself. So that's something that I think remains TBD, lid on the basket, no lid on the basket, whatever you want to call it. I think that's remains an open question. So real curious to see how this team does in that area. But like I said, other than just like hoping for good health for everybody, it's hard to not see this overall as being a really elite team, and one that's going to be one of the top handful of teams in the Big 12, and one that's going to expect to make another NCAA tournament run.
Guys, do you want to say 30 seconds about UL Monroe? Our Monday opponent?
Sure.
They play basketball in Monroe, Louisiana.
They're getting a lot of exercise on Monday night. No, I mean, not a ton to say. Haven't had a winning record in Sun Belt play since 2019. We're the second worst team in the country last year in 2-point field goal percentage, bottom 15 in effective field goal percentage. The only
not
thing
great, boys, not great.
Only thing they were okay at was shooting 3-pointers, and that was even okay-ish. At least 4 newcomers to the team, D1 or JUCO transfers, will likely have a big role. They do bring back last year's leading scorer, Tyreek LaCure, but he's the only returning starter from last year's team. They have a big man, Nika Metskavari-Shili. I'm going to give myself partial credit for that. Could pose some matchup problems as a stretch 4, but I mean, also nearly missed all of last year hurt, so probably some rust to knock off there. I think for me, the personal challenge is to not go crazy when Francis and Roberts put up really good numbers on Monday night going against maybe the worst collection of front court players UH will see for an opponent this year. So don't read too much into the result. Just enjoy watching this collection of players with Houston on the front of their jerseys go out there and play a game that counts.
All right. And in order to further help us get to know this Cougar men's basketball team, we did bring in an outside expert, someone that we've been looking forward to talking to for a minute. So let's go ahead and hear Sam's interview with Starnes Leland from the Daily Cougar.
Really excited to welcome on for the first time to the Scott and Holm podcast tonight, Starnes Leland, the sports editor for the Cougar, contributor also for GoCougs.com. Starnes, thanks for taking a little time to talk with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Excited my first time.
All right. So I'm going to start with something fairly recent. The Cougar men's basketball exhibition last Saturday against D2 UNC Pembroke. Obviously, you can only read so much into an exhibition. I think somewhere right now, Kelvin Sampson's ears are burning that I'm even asking you a question premised on an exhibition. But what did you see from Saturday's exhibition that surprised you, or maybe you didn't expect before you got to the Fertitta Center?
I think we had heard about, sort of the perimeter depth on this team. But I think when you saw it, you really saw it. How many guys they can just kind of throw out there who can, guard, number one, because, of course, that's the non-negotiable for a Kelvin Sampson team, guard and rebound, and then just guys who can come in and just keep everybody else fresh. I think last year, it was a lot put on those three starting guards, Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shedd, and Tremont Mark. Those guys were playing a lot of minutes because really the only other two guards they had were two freshmen on the bench, Emmanuel Sharp and Terrence Arsenault. Now those guys, Sharp and Arsenault, are they're sophomores now. They're more comfortable. They, looking to take a big jump. And then, also with those guys, you sort of have, in place of Mark and Sasser, you have LJ Cryer, you have Damian Dunn. Then you also have Malik Wilson, who redshirted last year. You had Ramon Walker, who redshirted last year. Those guys can come in spots whenever you need them, and you can sort of play all these different lineups. And then I think, in terms of another thing that sort of stuck out to me was sort of the front court sort of rotation. Started out with Juwan Roberts at the 4, and then Javier Francis starting 5. Again, I don't know how much you can read into rotations in an exhibition game, but it seems like they want Juwan a little bit more to be at the 4. I think he's size-wise, he's a 4. I think maybe play style-wise a little bit more of a 5. But I think last year with Jarris Walker coming in and sort of being a 4, Juwan was sort of in a little sort of a tough spot in terms of where he was supposed to be in the role he was playing in his position and stuff like that. And it also sort of sacrificed some of the rebounding, not having a guy, Jarris was 6'7", Juwan was 6'7". Javier is now 6'9". They can also throw in JoJo Tugler, who was sort of a revelation in the exhibition games. He really, you talk about a guy who's tailor-made for a Kelvin Sampson team. It's JoJo Tugler. He has this ridiculous wingspan, 7'6", 7'6" and he's 6'8", and he's just, you just see him everywhere. You've watched the game. He was everywhere when he was on the floor, blocking shots. If he didn't get a rebound, he was around it. He got a piece of the ball. He was around it. He was getting fouled like that. So those three right there, Javier, JoJo Tugler, and Juwan Roberts, seem to be sort of a really interesting front court combination. And I think you're also going to see a lot of four guard lineups with JoJo at the 5 or Javier Francis at the 5 or something like that.
So I want to take a quick left turn here. I've gotten to read a fair amount of what you've done in the past year or so at the Cougar, at GoCougs.com. So just tell us a little bit how you got into writing about sports, talking about sports in the first place.
Well, I think just sports, just as a part of my life, has just maybe the most consistent part of my life. My family, I'm the youngest of 4 boys. 2 oldest played high school sports. My oldest brother played rugby at A&M, was an All-American. My second oldest played football at Rice. And so we were just sort of a family. I was, even before I knew what was going on, I was going to their games, watching them, even when they were like middle school or stuff like that. I was just there in a stroller, didn't really realize it. And then, of course, as I grew older, I was still going to their games in high school and college. And so sports was just always there. Our TV, if there's a TV in our living room, if there's a TV on in our house, it was probably on ESPN or some sport or track and field or baseball or something. And so that was just sort of what I grew up in. And I think as I sort of grew older and sort of thought about what I wanted to do, I figured, I think sports is just, it's always there for me. And I figured, why not try to make a career out of that? And I ended up, I figured, I wanted to be in sports, which I mean, a lot of people do because it sounds nice. It sounds fun and easy. And I ended up, I think after my sophomore year, becoming a journalism major and joining the Cougar as a staff writer. That first semester, so last fall, I was just a staff writer for the Cougar under James Mueller, who's awesome sports editor, awesome guy,
former guest of the podcast, James Mueller.
Yep. And he trusted me. He thought I did good work, so he gave me a lot of opportunities to go to football games, go to basketball games, and I remember he got sick with the flu, I think mid-November or maybe mid-November, right, maybe a little bit before Thanksgiving. He got sick with the flu, and he asked me if I could cover these two home games, these two home basketball games. And I was like, sure. And I went to both of them. I wrote the recap for both of them. And funny story with the first one, I had woken up like middle of the night, like 4 a.m. with like a terrible migraine to the point where I ended up like throwing up. And I was like, okay, this is bad. So I was able to go back to sleep. Finally, I woke up and I started feeling okay. And I just was like, I'm still going to go, even if it was a bad decision. So I ended up going to the game, wrote the recap. 2 days later was the next game. And that was after that game was when Ryan Montso, Go Cougs, introduced himself to me, said he liked my recap the other day. And I was like, thanks. And then after Thanksgiving, he DM'd me and sent me a long message, asked me basically to be the beat writer for the basketball team that year, for the rest of that year. And I was like, yeah. And so really that was sort of the start of like, now I'm head on into this. And really since then, it's sort of been full speed. Later that next semester, I was assistant sports editor. Ended up, James graduates. He lets me be the sports editor, and now we're here. So
nice. So LJ Cryer, back to Cougar Hoops, comes in as probably the most hyped incoming transfer of this era of Cougar basketball. Previous All Big 12 pick at Baylor, guy with really good shooting numbers. Damian Dunn also coming in, maybe not the same level of hype, but I think definitely comes in as an instant impact kind of guy. What do you think Cougar fans can expect to see from Cryer and Dunn in the coming season?
Cryer, I mean, when you think about sort of the hole that Marcus Sasser left, he'll be in such a Cougars all-time leading three-point shooter, Jerry West Award winner, great defender, first-round draft pick, all that stuff. It seemed like a big void to fill. But when you bring in a guy like LJ Cryer, that scoring for the most part is really sort of taken care of. He played, I graduated high school the same year as him. He played in the same district as my high school. He used to beat us up. I didn't play, but he used to beat us up, Cinco Ranch. And he's just a guy who, I mean, just can really, really score. Kelvin Sampson at Media Day said, there are some guys that can make shots from every once in a while, but they aren't shot makers. And LJ Cryer is a shot maker. He shoots it better than 40%. He just has an incredible, really pretty shot, and is just really versatile in terms of just where he can score, what he can do. And so I think from that standpoint, that he's going to be the primary option offensively, and that's where things are going to go with Damian Dunn. You know, Tremont Mark leaving in the portal. Damian Dunn, you know, the U of H was sort of familiar with him being at Temple. They played him some like 6 times. Damian was the leading scorer when Temple beat U of H last year. He's sort of got like a really sort of an old school sort of contact finding, really knack for finding contact really in the paint and getting to the free throw line, and isn't, you know, looking to improve is a fine shooter looking to improve on that. So he's going to be one of those guys, I think, where, you know, when they need a bucket, maybe he'll go, or they need to stop a run. He's one of those guys that Damian Dunn will come down, get fouled, stop the run, hit the free throws, and then you move on, or he'll get an and one or something like that. That's sort of what you're looking for with Dunn and Cryer.
Who's the player on this team do you think that maybe isn't getting the most attention here in the preseason, but that you think will ultimately play a really crucial role on this team?
I think it's Xavier Francis. This is his junior year. He's young for a junior. He's 20. He was a sophomore last year. Calvin Sampson called him a freshman all year just because it was his first real playing time, and he came to the program so young. His role is gonna step up. He's not gonna. I wouldn't expect him to average like 30 minutes a game at the 5 or anything like that. But you know, I think one of the things that was sort of missing on last year's team was that big, tall, sort of long rebounder, like a Josh Carlton or Bryson Gresham, who could sort of just swallow up those misses offensively and defensively and sort of make teams pay a little bit for going small with rim protecting and things like that. Because there were a couple times last year against Miami, against Alabama, Memphis a little bit, where teams were sort of able to spread them out, and then they couldn't rebound well enough for a Kelvin Sampson team. Relatively couldn't rebound well enough to sort of detract that, and that's sort of what Xavier Francis can bring. So if he, you know, depending on the step he takes this year, I think he could be a really underrated player and really be really important, especially down the stretch.
Fully agree with everything you say, by the way, but it's wild because you look at last year's teams like rebounding metrics, it's like way above average, if not elite, but tells you how insanely high the standard is for Kelvin Sampson. He was doing that specific thing. Wanted to look ahead to the season schedule a bit here. Wanted to ask you a 2-parter here as well. What non-conference and conference games respectively do you think will tell us the most about this Cougar team and their postseason aspirations?
I think, you know, you have, you know, non-conference that I think the first sort of big game is, or maybe it's towards the end of the non-conference, is it's the game at Toyota Center against A&M, and I think, you know, that'll be a good game. A&M is a good team, but I think the road sort of is it a road game? It might be neutral. I'm trying to remember. I have the schedule put up.
Are they counting A&M as it's a good question. I don't know.
That's okay. Xavier is in Cincinnati. So I mean that game,
yeah.
Xavier's really good. They're in, you know, it's the Big East and the Big 12 in terms of best college basketball conferences right now. And I think that game going on the road in a tough environment will probably tell us the most, because, you know, on the road against Xavier, that could tell you a lot about how they're going to play on the road at Baylor, on the road at, you know, Texas, Kansas, those teams. And so I think that in terms of a non-conference game, that's sort of the litmus test. I feel like, you know, it'll be early on in the season and the team won't look the same as it will in January and February, but that I think is probably the biggest of the non-conference games. Conference games, I mean, it's you know, it's every game in the Big 12 there's no gimmies really. I mean, there really isn't. I think, their first game, West Virginia, is maybe the worst team they play. Or maybe
I'd throw UCF in there, but I mean,
UCF.
But your general point's right. There's not really any off nights, with maybe an exception here and there.
UCF is one of them, I think. But I mean, you have Kansas on senior night, the last home game of the season. That's as big as you can get, at least in terms of where the teams stand right now, in terms of the polls and everything like that. You have Texas. You have, I think, going on a road game against Baylor is a really tough place to play, and at Kansas. So I think if you really want to know a whole lot about a team, is how they go on the road against a good team. And I think in terms of how that translates to March, it's probably a good test.
So while we have you here, figured we'd talk a little Cougar football as well, who you also cover in your various writing and talking duties. What kind of chance do you think this Cougar team has to win 3 of its final 4 games and clear that bar for bowl eligibility?
Well, they lucked out with the remaining schedule, I think. Baylor, Cincinnati, and UCF, I think, are with U of H sort of at the bottom of the conference. So I think getting those guys to end your schedule is probably a good way to, salvage a bowl game. I think the issue is that 2 of those 3 teams are on the road. Baylor being the next one, and then UCF being the last one. And so, after the Kansas State game, how they're going to be able to regroup and go to Waco this Saturday is, I think, probably going to tell us really all we need to know about if they can go to a bowl game, or or how many games really they can win to end out the season. Cincinnati is probably, in terms of just, if you look at the easiest game schedule sort of on paper, it's probably them. They've been real bad. And so the schedule looks good for them just on paper, but I don't think we've really been able to predict anything that's happened with this team all year. And I'd be making the mistake to say they're going to win this many games, or this game or this game. So, but yeah, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, no, fully agree there. Wanted to close it on this. You've done some writing I've really enjoyed this year for the Cougar, including a series called SWC Rewind. What have been your favorite stories to kind of discover from UH seasons gone by before your time around?
Oh yeah. That series has been really, really fun. I got to talk to 4 players. I got to talk to David Klingler, Ted Party, son of Jack Party, A. Lois Blackwell, running back, and then Chuck Brown. And they, it was sort of a pair of 2 different eras. The Party, Ted and David were in the run and shoot, and then A. Lois and Chuck were at the beginning of the Southwest Conference with Bill Yeoman. One of the things that, there are a few stories. Chuck and Alos told me about a trainer they had. I don't remember. I don't know why his name escapes me. It's Tom something. But he had a peg leg, and he would say some of the wildest things. He'd make guys run for some of the wildest things. He would, give his players a vitamin B12 shot in the leg, and then he would just say, stay right there, and then go walk away, go do something else, and then come back with the shot, and then take it out, and then move on his business. And then he had all these crazy sayings like you couldn't break a dozen eggs under your shoulder pads, things like that, with the way you're playing. And there was the Texas Tech stories were pretty fun, with just how wild it is some of their games in Lubbock were. You had this sort of snowball out of nowhere. I think at 88 or 89, 88. And, Texas Tech fans were throwing snowballs. They were trying to run the run and shoot in the ice, and they can't. They didn't have any winter clothes, winter cleats or anything like that. So then the equipment trainers go to a sporting goods store. They get these screw-in cleats. They bring them back. And then they go on and they win the game. And then as they're leaving, Tech fans are throwing snowballs. And at the same time, they're getting leis put on them, like Hawaiian lei necklaces put on them from the Aloha Bowl committee, because they had just clinched their Aloha Bowl committee. And there's a picture that's in the store and pretty famous on the internet of Jack Party sort of with a big jacket on, a lei around his neck, and a really red sort of cold face. And there are some other stories that I don't know if I'll be able to share, like in writing. I think there was a game against Arkansas where there was some, I think, obscenities thrown to somebody's mother. U of H player goes up in the stands. His teammates go up in the stands. They get in a brawl with the Arkansas fans. I mean, all types of stuff. There's so much that I want to get to, and we're not done. I mean, the next Southwest Conference Rewind story will be probably Friday.
Nice.
Yeah.
My follow-up. I was actually going to ask about that, but Friday, you heard it here first, folks. Starnes, it's been great having you on. Where can the people find you and what you do?
Well, you can find me at the Daily Cougar, dailycougar.com. You can find myself there. Find me on Twitter /X or whatever it's called, at Starnes Leland. You can find me. You can find me there. We at the Daily Cougar, or at the Cougar rather, we really pride ourselves on being, we're really the only place where you get full coverage of every sport at U of H. And myself, my assistant editor Riley, photo editor Ann, and then all of our staff writers in the sports section. I've been really happy with how we've done things and how the writers have done. And so don't only just check my stuff out, check out the writers, check out our news, opinion, all that stuff. Check it all out.
So thanks again to Starnes for giving us some additional expertise on the upcoming Cougar men's basketball season. Before we totally turn the page on our men's basketball preview, we did want to talk about the rest of the Big 12. And obviously there are plenty of teams to get through, so we don't want to spend too long on anybody, but we did do about a 30-second preview each for each of our schools. So are we just doing this in Big 12 preseason poll order? Is that the theory here?
That works for me. For me. I don't even know what the order is. I didn't even look at that. I was all right, because I did such a good job prepping.
I'll do MC here and throw it, as I do have all the teams here in order. So we'll start with me in Kansas, number 1, who is predicted to be the favorites yet again. They lose their top scorers in Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick from a year ago, but return and I mean this is a huge compliment, Jamal Shed-esque point guard in DeJuan Harris, as well as double-digit scorers in Kevin McCullough and KJ Adams. And no big deal, they reeled in the biggest fish in the transfer portal in Michigan big man, Hunter Dickinson. And then they brought in a Kansas-esque recruiting class like you expect them to do. So, when you've won 19 of the last 22 regular season conference championships, you get to be the presumptive favorite. And that kind of says that you're used to dealing with expectations, which is, I think, maybe the only thing that you could question is how they're going to deal with huge expectations. But they've kind of shown they do that year in and year out, and they seem to be doing okay. Number 2 on the list is going to be your Houston Cougars, who we just talked about. Number 3 is
Cougs.
Some SEC school that doesn't belong on this list. So number 4 is going to be the Baylor Bears.
All right, so Baylor finished last year 23-11 and made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. This year, the Bears lose a good amount of talent. They struggled defending last year, and this year they may need to depend on that side of the court. So watch out for them. If they can defend this year, then they are going to be pretty good. The game changer for Baylor could be Jacoby Walker. He's the 5-star freshman out of McKinney. If he can put it together this year and do what everyone kind of expects him to do, look out for Baylor to be a pretty good team this year.
All right, then Bobby, right back to you, as number 5 on the list is the Horned Frogs of TCU.
All right, another tourney team from last year. Bring back 5 big-time contributors from their team last year, and their problem is going to be the three-pointer. They ranked 330th in the country last year on three-point percentage, which I don't know if you guys know this, isn't good. They're going to need to get better there, and look for TCU to be a very strong defensive team to really put some pressure on guys and get out running, since they can't shoot the three, and they're definitely not doing it from a set position, set offense. If they can get steals and turn the ball over, look for them to get out and run and win that way.
All right, and then Sam will get you involved here. Number 6 on the list, the Wildcats of Kansas State.
Yeah, quick reminder, what an insanely good first year Jerome Tang had at K-State, their head coach. Brought back only a couple players from one of the Big 12's worst teams 2 seasons ago, finished last season in the Elite 8 and the top half of the Big 12 standings. I think they have some questions to answer, replacing some pivotal guys. Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, I think, chief among them. I think bigger picture expectations also going to be pretty high after that incredible year 1, but obviously that's the most champagne of champagne problems. Tang and his staff did a really great job on paper answering those 2 big departures in the portal. Tyler Perry, a super productive guard from UNT, comes in for his final college season. Everything about Perry screams guy who's ready for a step up in competition. Also, Arthur Kaluma comes in at power forward from Creighton after being a starter and double-digit scorer basically his entire time there. Kaluma, along with returning guys Naquan Tomlin and David Ngessen, I think is going to be a really difficult front court to match up with. Bigger picture, the staff also brought in 3 good high school recruits, and out of that group, I think Day-Day Ames will be a guy who has a pretty big role. I mean, last year seems a hard act to follow, but have a hard time picturing this being anything other than a team comfortable on the right side of the field and in the top half of the Big 12 when it's all said and done.
All right, number 7, the Iowa State Cyclones, and head coach TJ Otzelberger, I would argue, does not get enough credit for taking over a team that went 2-22 3 years ago and getting them to consecutive NCAA tournaments the last 2 seasons. The Clones do graduate. There are only 2 double-digit scorers from last year in Jaron Holmes and Gabe Kalsher. But, the last 2 years under Otzelberger, we've seen that defensive identity is very much the lead, not who your scorers are. And neither of those Holmes nor Kalsher were super high efficiency scorers that you feel like you're just totally not going to be able to replace. They did bring in Omaha Baloo, the number 11 overall high school recruit at any position, the highest rated player ever to sign with Iowa State out of high school. They brought in a couple other 4-star guys as well. So I expect this to be a defensive first team as well. And, I think that they can, honestly, it's not going to be that hard to be better, more efficient offensively than they were last year. So I like their chances to finish maybe even higher than 7th in the Big 12. And that takes us to number 8, which, Sam, is the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Yeah, funny enough, Tech is the only team in the Big 12 this year bringing in a first-year non-interim head coach, as Grant McCaslin comes in after a really successful run at UNT. McCaslin was a small college head coach in the earlier part of this millennium and had an extended stint as a Baylor assistant under Scott Drew before taking the UNT job. A lot of intriguing pieces on this team. Not sure exactly how it all fit together yet. A very different looking team than last year. They did keep Pop Isaacs, the only returning guy who played anything close to a big role in last year's team, but he's a nice building block as a guy who can handle the ball and score in a few different ways. Kyron Lindsey is a big guard and a matchup problem, not to mention a guy who has at least a big time recruit pedigree when he initially enrolled at UGA, but not much in the way of a D1 body of work. They brought in a couple of veteran guys from Arizona State as well. Big man Warren Washington and wing Devin Cambridge. Darian Williams was also the Mountain West Freshman of the Year last year at Nevada Reno. Also Chance McMillan transferring up from Grand Canyon. Like I said, a lot of intriguing guys, but also a lot of new faces. And I'm sure McCaslin would have loved to bring in his top guard at UNT, Tyler Perry, but like I just mentioned a moment ago, he's at K-State. Tech will defend and play at an extremely deliberate pace. UNT was literally dead last in the country last year in tempo, but I think the Red Raiders will be right at that cut line of being an NCAA tournament team and at least somewhat improved from the team last year that tied for the worst record in the league.
All right, Sam, you can keep it going. Number 9 is the Mountaineers of West Virginia.
Oh, buddy, you could do podcasts plural about the insane offseason West Virginia's had. I will try.
In 30 seconds.
I will try and compress as much as possible, and I think I can. Bob Huggins was let go / resigned. There's some dispute there after being charged with DWI only a short time after saying a homophobic slur on live radio and getting disciplined by the university, but not fired for that specific transgression. And that actually came on the heels of a really good transfer class that Huggins and his staff brought in, which obviously the departure didn't allow to stay intact. Josh Eilert, a long time Huggins assistant, as the interim head coach for this season. West Virginia just recently had their transfer waiver denied for a really promising player, a 2-time transfer, but incoming guy, Raekwon Battle from Montana State. Also, their expected starting point guard, Kerr Kriisa, was just suspended for the first 9 games of the season for impermissible benefits he got at his last school, Arizona. If that wasn't bad enough, big man Akok Cook collapsed last Saturday during their exhibition with George Mason, and from what I can tell, is hospitalized, though in stable condition. Obviously, really difficult offseason, but even with that roster instability, there's still some intriguing pieces here. 5th-year big man Jesse Edwards comes in from Syracuse. And I'm on the record, I will admit, as a big Kerr Kriisa hater, but I think he's good enough to be a point guard on a top 50 or top 55 team, kind of like West Virginia. I mean, I think if this team can get the NCAA to really reconsider Raekwon Battle's eligibility, it raises the ceiling a lot, but big if. And if this team is even around the NCAA tournament bubble this year, I think Josh Eilert should be getting Big 12 Coach of the Year consideration. Just been the offseason to end all offseasons, quite honestly.
Yeah, right. Not great for West Virginia this year.
Not great.
Well summarized. Number 10, Oklahoma State. This is a Cowboy team that's missed the last 2 NCAA tournaments and 4 of the last 5, which is uncharacteristic for this program. And part of that has been some ludicrously punitive sanctions that have hurt them. And you'd like this to be a year that they kind of get back in the saddle with putting those things behind them. But I think roster-wise, this still looks like a potential transition season for them. They return a couple of very experienced guards in John Michael Wright and Bryce Thompson, both of whom are good players, but I don't know that either is a star level talent. And that's kind of it for returning significant players. That there are a few transfers, but they're all from smaller conferences. Then they did bring in not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 4-star forwards who have yet to play college ball. One kind of took a roundabout red shirt last year. The other 3 are like true freshmen, but looks like might be relying heavily on maybe up to 4 freshmen in the front court, which is not necessarily where you want to be if you're trying to get back to the NCAA tournament. And then number 11 on the list is going to be the Cincinnati Bearcats, another team on a little bit of a tournament drought. They haven't been to March Madness since 2019. They are now in year 3 of the Wes Miller era. And he's shown improvement since the kind of disastrous John Brannon experiment, but certainly this is a team that, has tournament and beyond expectations of that program. And then that's not great news because over this past offseason, they basically rebooted close to the entire roster as even most of the guys who had eligibility left did hit the portal. There were 2, I think, very important exceptions and guys that stayed around, both in the front court in Victor Locken, the center who I thought, took a really impressive step forward last year. And then Odi Aguama, kind of a, steady veteran, not a all conference guy, but, I think can be a steady presence in the front court and kind of doing the opposite of Oklahoma State, where they've got the 2 forwards coming back. And then they're going to rely probably fairly significantly on some guards that are freshmen, because they brought in a pair of 4-star guards in Rayvon Griffith. And then I buried it until the very end, but also the excellently named Jizzle James, the son
I'm waiting for you to say his name.
The son of the NFL's Edgerrin James, and then some transfers to fill out that roster as well. So I don't know. I think this is a team that may be, I think might finish a little bit ahead of 11th in the Big 12, although that's not a super high bar. And then number 12 is again another SEC team that's on this list for some reason, which brings us to number 13, Sam, the Cougars of BYU.
Yeah, kind of a pivotal year for 5th-year head coach Mark Pope. He had 2 strong seasons to start in Provo, but it's coming off 2 pretty mediocre ones in the West Coast Conference. The Cougars of the U brought in a couple of mid-major guys with 3-point shooting ability, Ali Khalifa from Charlotte and Dawson Baker from UC Irvine, to try and improve what I think is maybe their biggest offensive weakness from last year, really bad 3-point shooting team, and also projected to have back Trevin Nell, their best shooter from 2 years ago, who missed last year, hurt, though obviously you worry anytime a shooter has a major shoulder injury. I really am intrigued by a couple of their projected starters, Fosenyi Traore, and Jackson Robinson. Traore is a tough, undersized 4 who can rebound the hell out of the ball. Really looks as much like a Kelvin Sampson player as anyone not on Kelvin Sampson's team in this league. And Robinson is kind of a big guard, small forward tweener who can take on some of the tougher defensive matchups and kind of figured out what his role is after kind of an abortive start to his college career at A&M and then Arkansas, where he didn't really stick in either place. Ken Pom is weirdly high on BYU, 36th in the country, which makes it really hard for me to go against him. But like also I have a hard time seeing them any better than around that 10th or 13th, 10th to 13th kind of grouping in the league.
Maybe the 13th best team in this conference will also be the 36th best team in the country. I think
It very well could be.
It could be, yeah.
Well could
be true. Who knows? Finally, Bobby, you don't have anything else interesting going on in your life right now. So why
nope,
don't you
I'll take my sweet time with this. So the University of Central Florida Golden Knights, this could be an ugly, ugly year for them. They weren't a bad team last year, right? They made the NIT, made it to the second round. That's fine. But they are facing a massive step up in competition, as somebody who is also jumping up in that competition know. They're stepping up in that competition. That massive turnover, it's not going to do them any favors, right? If you got 7 transfers on the board, it's really going to depend on how they do. If they come in and they are successful and the 7 transfers are good, they could be a thorn in the side of some of the top teams, right? That could be an arena that you don't want to travel to, maybe have a couple of issues there, and they can compete against some other teams higher up than them in the rankings, which, is everybody. But if the transfers don't work out very well, it could be a very, very ugly season in the Big 12 for the University of Central Florida Golden Knights.
Real quick, when we had on over the summer Adam from our 10-12 sister podcast, Sons of UCF, I asked about basketball season, and he kind of said, he's like, yeah, I think I'd be pretty happy with 3 to 4 conference wins this year. Also, UCF fans love arguing stuff, and you will not find a soul on the internet who is like, no, we're not the 14th best out of 14 teams. They're all like, yeah, no.
They're not. You just don't know.
They won't go winless.
The more and more
I think they'll go winless. That's all.
No, but the more I research the team, the more it's just like they could be okay, or they could just be absolutely awful.
All right. Well, as much as I'd love to turn this 2-hour episode into a 2.5-hour episode by doing some Big 12 football recap and preview, I think we're gonna pass on that one. So on our way out, just say, as always, just huge thank you to our Scott Holman podcast Patreon supporters, who we tremendously appreciate. If you do enjoy this podcast, you feel like you can afford $5 a month to support us, patreon.com/SH podcast. You can tweet at us at SH podcast. You can podcast.bsky.social on the blue sky. Email us shpodcast@gmail.com. That's it. Bobby, go watch your baseball, and as always,
go Rangers.
Cougs. Oh no, cut this guy's mic.